Good evening. I want to convene the regular meeting of the Brattleboro Selectboard for Tuesday, May 15th, 2018. Has the meeting been properly warned?
Yes, it has.
Thank you. The first order of business is to approve the minutes of the May 1st meeting. Does anyone like to make a motion?
So moved.
We have a motion to approve the minutes of the May 1st meeting. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries 5-0. It is time for chair's remarks, but I have no remarks. So that doesn't mean nothing important's happening. It's just that I have no remarks. And I don't know if the assistant town manager who is here on behalf of the town manager has anything that he would like to announce.
I have no remarks this evening. Thank you.
Great. Does anyone on the select board have any?
I do.
Brandy, you may go first.
I would like to remind everybody that the Camp for a Common Cause Groundworks Collaborative event will be held on Friday evening up at the Common in Brattleboro. You can choose to camp out and get sponsored for that, or just camp out, but otherwise you can also show up for live music. There's barbecue, there's a raffle, and it's a chance to kind of interact with people from our community that you may not have been fortunate enough to cross paths with yet. You can certainly reach out to Groundworks for more information, or just show up at the Common on Friday evening.
Thank you, Brandy. Anyone else?
I don't.
No. David, do you have anything? All right, great. Next up is public participation, and this is the time in the meeting where we welcome comments from the public on issues that are not on tonight's agenda. So I don't know if anyone in the audience would like to speak to something not on tonight's agenda. Yes, Mr. Esty. And please come and introduce yourself and tell us where you're from.
My name's Wayne Esty. I'm from Brattleboro, 83 Main Street. Two things. One is you may not be aware that when the garbage trucks come and collect the barrels on Main Street in the morning, they take the recycled barrels and the regular trash and put them all in the same back of the truck. I have seen on one occasion where there were separate areas to put recyclables and the regular trash, but that was once. Probably didn't know that. Second thing was a recent MSN article that credited Bellow Falls with being the poorest town in Vermont. And I suppose that depends on when you collect your data, but 3 other towns by my data fall in the same category, which includes Brattleboro for average income, Halifax, Athens. So we may not have been pointed out by MSN on their homepage, but we're pretty close. Thank you.
Thank you. And we can ask our representative to the solid waste district.
Absolutely.
He will look into how the trash is picked up.
Yeah, I do have a couple of follow-up questions. Perhaps I can reach you
Offline.
by email tomorrow?
Sure.
Excellent.
It's waynesd@hotmail.com.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Esty. Is there anyone else in the public that would like to comment on something that's not on tonight's agenda? Seeing none, I will ask for a motion to convene as liquor commissioners.
So moved.
We have a motion to convene as liquor commissioners. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Our one and only business under liquor commissioners this evening is to approve a first-class liquor license and outside consumption permit for MKR LLC, doing business as India Masala House. Did I get it right? Which is located on 1380 Putney Road. And I don't know if you'd like to come up, sir, and you can sit at our table. And while you're getting up there, I want to ask the assistant town manager if all of the police, fire, and other folks have signed off on this.
Absolutely. Each of the relevant departments, police and fire and the treasurer's office, have all examined the application or are recommending your approval.
Okay, great. Do you want to tell us who you are and where your business is, and if you want to tell us a little bit about your restaurant and what your
Okay.
plans for selling alcohol and all that is, we would appreciate it.
Thank you. Well, good evening, everybody. Well, my name is Madan Rathore, and people easily say Madan, say this, So I just opened this restaurant last week. May 13 was the grand opening for us, and went very well. I do have a little bit history about restaurants. I had a restaurant in Keene, in Greenfield, Mass. And I always loved this town, and I always wanted a restaurant here. Almost like 18 years ago when I came here, first time I saw this town. So, and I became a resident 6 months ago here. So I'm from here, you can say now. And yes, I just want to serve the town and the people a good, healthy food that I hope people had a good response when I was in Greenfield or Keene, So hopefully I would serve the same kind of that food that everybody wants it and be as I said, clean and neat, a good plate, I would say, yeah.
Now, where exactly are you located so people can find you?
It is at the Quality Inn Motel.
Okay.
Yeah, it's on the Putney Road.
Okay, and are you open 7 days a week or?
We're open 6 days a week right now.
Okay, what days are that?
It's Monday we are closed.
Okay,
Yeah.
and what are your hours?
We start 11:30 for lunch.
Okay.
It goes till 2:30.
Okay,
And we open for dinner at 5 o'clock. And
Okay.
yeah, it's 9 or 9:30,
Okay.
10-ish, then we'll see how the response we have.
okay.
Yeah.
And you want an outside consumption permit, so I'm assuming there's some
Yes, ma'am.
outside
Yes,
seating?
we do have a patio, so I think maybe it's nicer that people love to eat out, and so that would be a great help, especially in summertime.
Right.
So, and maybe the bar hours can help us to grow too. Because of this motel, people don't want to drive after they have consumption, the alcohol or something. So that would be a good idea to do it.
Right. Great. Great. And you said May 13th you actually officially opened.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. We want to give you an opportunity to let people know you're there, so.
Thank you.
Does anyone on the board have any questions?
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Just looking at some of the history, my short time in Brattleboro for the past, 8-9 years, and looking at restaurants coming and going. So I'm curious about what your plan is, one, to let everybody know you're there, but also two, longevity and what you may be thinking in terms of staying around and continuing to provide some delicious cuisine to this area.
I want to retire from here. That's exactly, yes. That's my dream, and hopefully I will do it. Maybe I'll write a couple books, maybe I have a good health, That's something I'm planning to. That's why I become even resident here, So I'm not going anywhere, if you guys are there, if I see you there, Yeah, that's I need from everybody. And I promise I will, I want to be here.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, we're glad you moved here, so.
Thank you.
Does anyone else on the board have any questions?
Yes.
Yes, Brandy.
Has the lunch buffet started yet?
Oh.
It is. It did.
Wonderful, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Does anyone in the public have any questions or comments on this liquor license? Seeing none, would anyone on the board like to make a motion?
Oh, sure. I move that we approve a first-class liquor license and outside consumption permit for MKR LLC, doing business as India Masala House.
We have a motion to approve a first-class liquor license and outdoor consumption permit for MKR LLC. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Congratulations, and
And I
we
thank you.
wish you much success.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Seeing you
ma'am.
soon.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Would someone like to make a motion to adjourn as liquor commissioners?
So
We have a motion to adjourn as liquor commissioners.
Got us into it.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries 5-0. First order of business under unfinished business is the second public hearing and hopeful, I think, adoption of the 2018 town plan. And as everyone remembers, it was at our last board meeting where we had the first public hearing. 2 public hearings are required before we can adopt the town plan. So what I'll do is call the public hearing to order. And I will turn it over, I guess, to Rod Francis and Sue and Liz, if they'd like to give the Reader's Digest version of, once again, why we are here.
Sure. Good evening, I'm Rod Francis, I'm the Planning Director, and this is Sue Fillion, the Planner, and Liz McLaughlin, the Planning Commission Chair with me tonight. So this, as you said, is the second hearing that's required under statute for the adoption of the 2018 town plan. Last time, you'll recall, we gave a brief overview of the town plan and took public comment. And here we are again this evening. We're happy to take answer questions or provide insight into how we put the plan together. Otherwise, that's it.
And it was mine, I think, Shanta, you were the one that brought up an issue last time about the Town Arts Committee and references to it in the town plan.
Well, right, and also the mention of it in the matrix as being responsible
Yeah.
for some actions.
Yeah.
And as I understand it, there was no, the language is not going to be adjusted, but I still suggest that we have the representative from the Town Arts Committee come forward and let us know how we could possibly help in recruitment.
Yeah, and I think what we also talked about was being a little bit aggressive when we're seeking to fill the vacancies on the Town Arts Committee. So I think I think that was the resolution to the one issue that came up, at least at the last hearing, amongst ourselves.
And I think we should
Yeah.
seek to do that throughout the town plan. Like, if there are things in the town plan where there are groups that don't seem as active, or they need more members, that we should try to make sure to help as best we can fill those gaps with.
Yeah. I agree. So does anyone on the board have any comments above and beyond? Yeah.
I think a comment I would like to say is to remind people that this is kind of a 65,000-foot document, and that a lot of work is done underneath it. So if you're reading the town plan, you're going, but this isn't everything I want from Brattleboro, try not to kind of try not to take that in as something that's anxiety producing, because most of the work is done much closer to ground level, and this document is looked at frequently and can be a living document, and is meant to be overarching rather than like, this is a direction we're going come heck or high water.
I just had a question about what happens next, because there are not a lot of changes in the document, and I'm wondering if we need to print brand new, big, shiny, glossy ones like we had before, or we could do a small addendum to put inside the many volumes of the original that we have left.
Yeah, I think that there is enough change where you can't just do an addendum. That wouldn't work, but we definitely, even with the last one, while you all had the nice shiny glossy copies, it was mostly distributed on a thumb drive, a flash drive, for people to use. So we'll plan on doing that again. We'll put it up on the web. I think we are talking about having it formatted again.
The expectation would be to format it in a way that's similar in quality to the existing plan. Probably have a smaller print run even this time than last time, and have it available on the webpage and as a thumb on a thumb drive or something similar.
Great. Anyone on the board? Since this is a public hearing, is there anyone in the public who would like to make any comments about the 2018 version of the town plan that we are potentially adopting this evening? Yes. Mr. Estee. And even, oh yes, Mr. Esty, please come up. And once again, for the viewing public, tell us who you are.
And speak up for me with stuffy ears. Sorry.
Yes, ma'am. You made references to what wasn't changed, but don't know how to find what was changed. Maybe the board could summarize those changes, particularly the ones I was interested in, but any that were made.
Can I throw that over to you folks? Rod?
I'm not sure if I quite follow Mr. Esty's question. So what I'd say is that I think that the way we resolved the matter at the last public hearing at the previous select board meeting was that there would be no text change as a consequence of the comments.
I think he means in general from the last.
I think that's a much hard, yeah. If you mean what's the difference between this 2018 town plan and then 2015 town plan, there is no side-by-side
That's not
comparison document. That's not,
That's not what he's asking.
no? What are you asking?
No, I think I understand. So,
No, that's good, because I don't.
so you had a list of items that you spoke to that you would like to see in the town plan at the last meeting. The version that is subject to the public hearing is the exact same one that was heard at the May 1st meeting. The select board, when they vote to take action tonight, can direct changes, but I don't feel like we came out of the May 1st meeting with any direction to make any changes. So nothing has been changed.
Correct, that's right.
That was
So,
your question.
okay. While I
Third time's the charm. Sue got it.
Thank you, Sue. It's like, all right, now I understand the question. Okay, and then also, I'd just like to point out that Josh Deal is here also from the Planning Commission in the audience tonight, so.
Thank you. Are there any more comments, either from the public or on the board, about the proposed town plan? Seeing none, I'm going to close the public hearing. And, sorry, I'm eating peanuts. Wondering if anyone on the select board would like to make a motion.
I will move to adopt the 2018 town plan as of May 15th, 2018, and I would reiterate my comments of don't panic, I believe is the phrase. We do good work at lower levels, and the town plan is just an overarching document.
Are you sneaking that into a?
I'm not sneaking that into the motion.
But Jen is writing furiously.
No, I am, the motion ends with the words as of May 15, 2018. The words that I just said are not in bold text. They're just regular text.
So we have a motion to adopt the 2018 town plan as of May 15th, 2018. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Thank you, folks. Thank you to Josh and everyone else on the planning
Yes,
commission.
thank
It's a
you for all your hard work.
Thank you.
It's a huge task, so thank you, thank you, thank you.
Good night.
And we'll see you, what, 5 or 8 years?
Unless something
Maybe
comes up.
7. and a half.
7.2, all right.
Yeah, okay. Not that we counted.
Next up on the agenda is the select board goals for 2018 and 2019. As we know, every year we like to put some goals together. It's a living, breathing document. I believe this is the third time we're looking at the document. I don't know if everyone on the board has had a chance to look it over. The additions that are on here were added from comments that were made at the last meeting. So I don't know if anybody has any changes, suggestions, or we're ready to move forward and adopt the goals this evening. How does everybody feel?
I think that everything that we discussed is in
Yeah,
there.
I mean,
We could update things that have happened in between, but I don't know it's really necessary.
right, these are good goals
Yeah.
to have
we're
on
gonna hear
paper, and
from-
we have other stuff we'll do too.
Okay. Does anyone in the public have any questions or comments about our goals? Seeing none, would someone like to make a motion?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the annual select board goals as presented.
We have a motion to approve the select board goals as presented. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries 5-0.
Going too far.
We are on a roll here. Next up is the proposed letter to the Vermont State Board of Education and Vermont Agency of Education for David Schoales. And I think this is the third time we talked about this.
First time what?
I think this is like the third time.
Third
we've talked
time,
about
yeah.
this too. So I'll shoot it back over to you, David.
Okay, well, the last meeting, a couple members asked for more information, and because of public meeting law, I was only able to meet with one of them. So Shanta and I talked, and I gave her some more information. I brought some more information to share with the other two members that weren't at the previous representative town meetings when resolutions were passed, and so I want to read the excerpts from that. And I also updated the language and removed one sentence about the judgment, I think, that Tim had expressed concern about, and I can find it and tell you what it is, but it's not there anymore. And brought, and changed the language to the same language that the school board approved on May 2nd. So what's in your book or what's in the binder now is the language that the school board approved, and that's the language I'm proposing for us for tonight.
I'm sorry. The school board letter is the exact language that you're proposing that we sent?
Except for the Brattleboro Town School Board at the top. It would say Brattleboro Town Meeting, or Brattleboro Select Board. Okay, so in the resolution, it mentions 2014, 2015, and 2017 representative town meetings. And the language in the 2014 town meeting, a resolution that Don Webster offered, talks about, whereas the bill the legislature was considering eliminates the role of representative town meeting in the governance of our elementary schools, he asked that the legislature conduct a robust public conversation with local school boards and the public around the state to see if the public will support the proposed governance system. And that was overwhelmingly adopted. The meeting that's recorded is overwhelmingly adopted. And in 2015, the next year, I brought a resolution that the representative town meeting does not support efforts by the Vermont State Legislature to empower the State Board of Education to determine the existence of the Brattleboro Town School Board and Town School District, and that also was recorded as overwhelmingly adopted. And then we took a year off because the law was in process and implementation was in process. There really wasn't much to talk about. Well, there's plenty to talk about, but not necessarily to act on. But then in 2017, a resolution from Andy Davis, Andy Davis, be resolved that the town meeting representatives of Brattleboro respectfully request that our state senators work with the Agency of Education to introduce legislation to ensure that no merger under Act 46 will take place that affects any school district in the Wyndham Southeast Supervisory Union without affirmative action by the voters of the school district involved. The motion was seconded, and after discussion, it was 72 in favor and 34 opposed. So in 3 separate town meetings, the town meeting representatives strongly supported not changing this town school governance unless the voters approved it. And in November of 2017, by a 2-to-1 margin, the voters in all 5 towns, and specifically in our case, Brattleboro, rejected the merger, and indicating that they wanted to try to keep our current governance system and meet the goals of the act under that structure. And this basically says that the WSCSU Alternative Governance Structure Subcommittee has developed a viable proposal for meeting the goals of Act 46, which is basically what those resolutions were asking for. And we ask you to consider these expressions of the public to review the options for the future of our town school districts. So that's the change in the resolution, and the reason I think it represents that it definitely is part of the town's business, since the representative town meeting voted for it 3 times. And the public in general that voted for us also voted not to merge without public support, without a public vote. So that's my pitch.
Does anyone on the board have any comments, questions, or thoughts?
I think that this is much closer to something I can get behind. I also would like to thank the members of the community who have taken the time to reach out to me in a very respectful, non-biased, and informative way over the past weeks. I am not going to sit here and play editor. I think the one thing I don't love is the word viable. I'd rather it just say has developed a proposal, but I'm trying, because once again, viable passes a judgment, and all we're here to do is support the vote. Viable passes a judgment on something, but I'm not trying to delay a vote over that, but I would feel more comfortable if it didn't have words like viable or better or any kind of things like that. And I did just want to thank the community for reaching out to me, as many people have over the past few weeks.
Anyone else on the board?
Are you proposing that there be another edit before we then vote on it, just to make it more neutral?
I mean, I don't want it to go to another meeting because that feels exhaustive, but like if we were sitting in a business room right now and we were editing a document before like going out to the public, then I would certainly edit that word out personally. I would do that.
Now, let me ask you, this is done in a memo form. The last time we saw it, it was letter form. Because I still have the same problems I've always had with this. So, and I actually don't even like putting the sentence in about the alternative governance structure. So I'm going to vote no. But if 4 people want to put their name on something, I don't know if that's how we want to do it. Or we could, because I just feel uncomfortable having something sent from the if it says from the Brattleboro Selectboard and I vote no on it, but there are 4 people that voted yes, it makes it sound like I voted for it. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
So I just would love it if we could do it in a different way, if we're gonna pass it.
Would you propose the alternative form for this?
I think bringing up the alternative, the WSCSU Alternative Governance Structure Subcommittee has developed a proposal for meeting the goals of Act 46. And again, this is where I think David and I sort of differ. The Agency of Education has 2 proposals.
Right.
One is from the Act 46 Study Committee. One is from the Alternative Governance Structure. And I think writing it like this sounds like we're supporting the alternative governance structure, which I don't think is what the intent, I don't think your intent is. I think the intent is, hey, Agency of Agency of Education, when you're looking at this, just remember the voters voted this way, but now we're adding a thing into it that says something else, and that's what I don't like about it. I don't mind saying to the Agency of Education, just remember, people weren't, these votes occurred, but I don't like saying there's another proposal because it implies that people are for that other proposal and nobody's voted on that other proposal.
Like if that sentence was gone.
I think
And it just said, we asked you to consider.
I think the reason that's there is because one proposal is to merge and one is to retain the current structure, to retain the SU structure.
But that part's not in our purview.
Well, no, it's not, but the vote was not to merge. And if you don't merge, then you have to have an alternative. The only alternative, really, if you don't merge, is to retain your supervisory union with member districts. There's not a third alternative.
Would you be comfortable just playing the scenario out? Would you be comfortable if you got rid of that reference to alternative governance structures and just said, we want to make sure that that we want to uphold what our voters voted on?
Yeah, like if you struck the first sentence of the second paragraph and began the second paragraph with the second sentence, how would that make you feel?
That's fine. I mean, I would, the
Okay.
first thing you said, Brandy, about taking Bible out, that is a judgment.
Yeah.
And the school board was willing to make that judgment because they were familiar
Well,
with
that's
the.
totally
yeah,
within
yeah.
there, yeah.
I would say another edit and then we can vote on it so that
Subject to
Well, we
edit.
can-
Subject to edit, yeah.
Yeah, yep. Kate, what you were talking about, if this were a resolution rather than a memo, The school board, when this went up, it just said 3-2. The vote was 3-2.
Right. Yeah, I just wanna make-
Other times, the members are listed and the
Yeah.
votes are listed, and we can do it either way.
Yeah. I mean,
It
I
sounds like
just-
you would like the members
That's
to be
not a
listed.
bad, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
resolution way is not a bad way, right? Is that
Right.
the way that would be better?
right.
Yeah? And you're
Yeah.
comfortable with that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that the second paragraphs be simply, we ask that you consider these expressions of the public will
Yeah.
as you review options for the
Yes.
future. Because they
That's fine with
they know what the options are.
Yes.
Yeah. I think
Absolutely.
that's an improvement.
Any other board comments?
I think I'll just say that I'm not comfortable, regardless of the language, with this being within our purview at all. So,
Right on.
I just want to point out that we just approved a town plan that has a big section on education, including preschool education. So,
Sure.
But he can, you know.
Does anyone in the public have any comments? Mr. Estee?
SD 83 Main Street. Mr. Schoales, you do not have to send me that letter if I were to become a state senator. Thank you.
No plug.
Right on.
Shameless.
Shameless, Wayne. I don't know what's going on here.
Yeah. All right, so the plan, are we going to take this to the next meeting? Is that the next
No,
plan?
I don't, I think, can we just do?
Okay.
approve it with
Okay.
only
Subject
one
to-
sentence.
Yeah,
What we-
striking the sentence and turning it into a resolution
Okay,
format.
and what we would do is list the names of the people who voted for it.
Right.
And say it's, well, I don't know what it's going to be, but 4-1 or whatever.
Whatever,
Okay.
3-2, whatever.
Okay. Okay, so it's my understanding that the first sentence in the second paragraph is
Struck.
being taken out.
Yes.
So we're all on the same page on that?
I am. You are, David?
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
And you're fine with the resolution format? All righty then.
All right.
Sounds like we're rolling.
All right, so would somebody like to make a motion to approve the letter, or I was going to do it as a letter, or the language
Sure.
as
I'll make something
amended?
up. I'll make it up and Jan can fix it. How's that?
As amended?
I move to approve?
Yeah, why don't you say approve?
I move to approve the language in the proposed letter to the Vermont State Board of Education and Vermont Agency of Education, subject to the striking of the first sentence in paragraph 2 and the setting of the language into a resolution format at which approving members would sign.
Are we all on the same page on that? Mm-hmm. All right, Brandy's made a motion, which I will not repeat. So all those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 All those opposed? Nay.
Nay.
So motion carries 3-2. Shanta, Brandy, and David's name will be on it. I don't know if we put Tim and I as opposing, I don't know what we do. Well, we need to make sure it's 3-2. It needs
Yeah.
to indicate there that,
Maybe like we do on some forms where it's like 2-2, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, 3A and 2 with
Yeah.
the names.
yeah,
Right on.
that'd be great.
Sounds good.
All right, thanks. Now we go to new business, which is John O'Connor's finance report.
Thank you, Kate. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening, John.
Good evening.
So included in your packet is the April financial report. And as of the end of April, we're 83.3% of the way through the year. And general fund expenditures were 81.8% of the annual budget. And we have certain annual payments that we make for insurance, human services, lease and note payments. And if we prorate those payments, it brings the expenditures down to 79.6%. So we're doing well compared to the budget, and it's looking very positive for the year. Utilities expenditures were 84.0%. Parking was at 85.6%. And again, utilities have annual expenditures in there for insurance and interest, and if we prorate those, it brings the utility fund expenditures down to 81.9%. So the parking fund's a little over the target at this point, and the utilities fund's a little under the target, but nothing that's of any major concern at this point. Solid waste disposal, expenditures are at 78.0%, or no, revenues were at 78.0, expenditures 80.5%. And again, there's always a delay in recognizing the refuse bag revenue and curbside collection costs and tipping fees, which April's won't be recorded until May. The loan report shows that we have $4,451,923 in outstanding loans. 4 loans had payments that were overdue, and 2 loans were in default, and they have been fully reserved. Program income shows that we have $442,162 in available funds for additional grants and loans as of the end of April. And then finally, there's an extensive report on our grants, and we have 49 active grants at this point and 10 grants that were in the application process as of the end of April. And that concludes the financial report. Unless you have specific questions on any of the data included in that report, I will definitely try to answer those for you.
Does anybody have any questions?
I have a minor question.
I have one.
In the listers section, it's hard not to notice a 857% increase in professional services. It's not a huge line item, but I just was curious if that's because that's
They're really
been,
professional.
What page is that, Tim?
Oh, sorry. It's page
It's
5 of 15.
Yep.
I'm just curious if there was a contracting out situation because the staff salaries dropped.
I think I can speak to that. So there has been a transition in staffing in the assessor's office. Russell Rice, as you know, retired.
Yep.
We have promoted Jennifer Brunel to be the town assessor. There's a period of time where we have brought in some outside assistance, particularly for commercial properties, to sort of bolster the capacity of the department. I wouldn't expect for this to become a regular annual increase. It's more of a transition.
Great.
Good question.
Suspected that, but I just wanted to confirm.
Does anyone else have any questions? I have a question. Page 11, and maybe it's because it's only May, and the public works sidewalk stuff, does that start happening now? I'm assuming?
I think it's safe to say, yeah.
Yeah.
Because they're so long, we haven't spent any of that money.
Sure, there's a good bit of work you really can't do in the wintertime.
Right.
And so paving, sidewalk repairs, that all happens in the beginning of the year and the end of the year,
Yeah.
not in the middle of the year.
Yeah.
So
So we'll do all the line striping, tree removal, whatever this broom material thing.
it's for the sweeper. So,
Oh, Brandy got all
People always
excited
wanna
about
know
something.
what
Yes, because I saw something
flying
on
brooms.
the Facebook, on the interwebs, about having crosswalks that were painted. They were like rainbow crosswalks. And I think it was less about making a statement and more about the fact that they were highly visible. So, if we ever wanted to be fancy and cool like that as an arts town and kind of a funky place, not that we would have to do, any specific design, but striping wears out fast and people barely see it anyway. So I'm just throwing it out there. If any of our public works people are feeling highly creative, I'd love to see what, That's unofficial. I don't want to get in trouble. That's unofficial.
Well, actually, I'll back that up a little bit. There's a practical consideration of being able to cross diagonally,
Yes.
which I always
Yeah, me
pride
too.
myself in doing,
Amen.
and a lot of locals do that. But there's a configuration, you can paint the sidewalks to make that clear to pedestrians,
Oh.
that you can cross diagonally.
Interesting.
Because this post was a little odd because it was pointing out that this crosswalk, everyone crosses at the same time, and we've had that for quite a while.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
a much safer way to cross. But to have these lines that actually indicate that you could do that is something to consider.
So there you go. Think outside the walk.
regardless of color, I think it.
But not too far outside the walk.
Yeah.
Don't go too crazy.
All right, so does anyone in the public have any questions about the April financial report? All right, thank you, John.
Thanks,
welcome,
John.
Kate.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Always easy to read.
Now, John is still on board because he's going to talk about the financial management questionnaire and internal controls checklist. And this is something we're required to do annually.
Yes. The first one is required by the state, by state statute, and it comes out of the Auditor of Accounts Department, and they put this checklist together. And there's no change in the state's checklist from last year. It's exactly, the responses are exactly the same. And overall, we do very well on these internal control checklists. There's a few areas where the auditors would, if we had a larger staff, we could segregate some of the duties a little better, but because of our staff size, we can't. And so there's a couple things in here where, again, we've answered no to certain things where we would prefer to have a yes there. But
Right.
they're few and far between. Overall, we do very well on these. The auditor's checklist are the following sheets, and there are a few changes from last year, not many, but there are a couple I can point out to you. On the first page of the auditor's checklist, it says cash and accounts receivable. There's a shaded heading. In the second line from the bottom, you can see that I've answered yes and no to that one.
Yeah.
And
That's my
last year we
favorite
answered
answer.
yes. And the reason is the yes is answering the first question. It says, are all funds deposited to accounts owned by the town? Yes.
Right.
Are any non-town funds deposited in town accounts? No.
Right.
So it's yes and no there. And that's
Right.
what we have. Then we're moving on to the second to last matrix here. And let's see what we have here. There's a general internal control section. It's the top of, I don't have page numbers here, but it says B, Municipal Checklist for Internal Control Part 2. And the very last question there is, have there been significant changes in the town's bank relationship? And last year we said no, and this year we responded yes. And the
Right.
reason we did that is because we have, as you know, put $5 million into Brattleboro Savings and Loan in an account there, and that's a pretty significant change in our banking relationships.
Yeah.
And that has worked out really well. We're doing very well with that. As the interest rates tick up, the amount of interest that we're paid, and the interest rate that we're paid by Brattleboro automatically ticks up with the interest rate. And then finally, at the very bottom of that page, there's a question, are computers used by finance personnel accessible remotely? And last year we had said, no, they're not, but they in fact are. And our computer service team that manages our computer networks and everything, they do have remote access to our computers and our systems. So those are the only changes that we had between last year and this year, and I think it's a little more accurate.
John, one question about that last point is the, I think it was, I don't know if it could have been 7 years ago, but I think it was just a couple years ago, the fire department got hacked and everything was frozen and they couldn't get into their data. And by having them available to our support people, does that make them vulnerable since they are remotely? I mean, if they can get in, can anybody get in if they're good enough?
I don't know the answer to that, Dave,
I can answer that.
but they have really put in, strong firewalls and other things that, should prevent that kind of thing from somebody who's, shouldn't have access to our system. So
Right.
I think with the firewalls that they've established and some of the other controls that they've put in place, there's safety issues and, the software to look for, bugs and whatever. I think we're in pretty good shape.
Companies do stuff like that. Generally, they're using like an encryption tunnel, which is kind of like a VPN connection. So basically think of it as like a tube where information is flowing freely, but nothing should be able to be seen or from the outside, and generally it's going in one direction.
Yeah, I think if you look at the track record of hackers, nobody's come up with a foolproof system yet. I mean, the most secure and the most tech savvy organizations on the planet have been raided.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering, is it really do we need their support so much that we need to keep those things online, or
Yeah, we do.
can they come in to do that work?
Patrick, you want to try answering that one?
My recommendation would be absolutely we need their assistance.
Okay.
I mean, I think you make a valid point. Nobody is invulnerable. I don't like to think of us as a particularly attractive target, except for a target of opportunity, which is what happened at the firehouse. At that particular moment in time, our security profile was completely inadequate. So, working with our present-day IT vendor, we put in place, much as John has said, numerous firewalls. We now have more modern equipment with more modern operating systems that are have valid licenses. We are taking every reasonable precaution, I believe, against hacking, and I'd recommend we hold the course at this point.
Yeah, if the value outweighs the likelihood of a loss, there's no question.
I mean, often that can be as user-friendly as them being able to remote in because you forgot your password.
Yeah.
And like these days, people expect stuff done so quickly that if you're locked out of a program, give yourself a panic attack waiting for somebody to show up on site to unlock you.
The other thing is, and just to point out, we have much improved backups from just even a couple of years ago. We would have routine failures of our backing up, whereas today our entire server is backed up. I think it's 3 times a day, and we've got images of that entire server going back about 60 days.
Perfect.
So I think we've made strong improvements there.
I have a little piece of paper stuck over my camera on my computer, and I unplug the modem when I'm not. No, I'm not that bad, but
Apparently you sleep better if you unplug the modem. I heard that somewhere, so you might be
the
onto
lights
something.
don't flash and blink. Thank you.
Hey, John, on the very first page, the one that's got the handwriting, has there ever been a theft and we have to write breaking and theft of the cash box on 1020? When do we get to not have to write that anymore?
Well, the problem is, it says, has there ever been a theft? Well,
Oh my God,
there has been.
So for like the next 100 years, we might still have to write
It's
that?
not falling under any statutes.
You can see I put the date in there. It's been now,
It's so stupid,
4
yeah.
years.
Yeah.
I've been reporting it every year. And it is kind of crazy, but that's been put together by the auditor's
Yeah.
office for the state, and that's the way they phrase the question.
Yeah.
In our external auditor's report there, they ask a similar type question, but it's not ever. It's,
Right.
have you had any indication of a theft or, something of that nature? But so we answer to that, we say no, but to this one, when it says ever.
Yeah,
Yeah, right on.
it's kind of dumb, but okay. All right. Does anyone else on the board have any questions?
I got 2 quick ones.
Yeah.
On section 3, purchasing, disbursements, and payroll. Number 21, are salary and wage rates approved by the select board? Check is no.
Yeah, and
We
that
don't-
one can go both ways. I mean, you approve the union contracts. You approve it, and you will tonight, hopefully, will approve the non-union wage increase. But things like the starting salaries that when we hire new employees, the town manager basically makes that decision. He doesn't really come to the select board and say, well,
Yeah.
do I need authorization to start so-and-so off at $40,000?
Right.
So those, setting those salaries, and those parameters, again, it doesn't come to the select board. The town manager is making that decision. So that's why we said no, but it is kind of a hybrid, you're right.
Because ultimately, the budget is approved by the select board.
Ultimately, the budget is approved by the
So
select
maybe it's a
board.
yes, no.
Might be another, we like the yes,
Or
no.
it could be depends.
I like the yes, no.
I'd also just add the collective bargaining agreements are all approved by the board, and many of our employees who are a member of a collective bargaining unit, those salary tables are going to be embedded within that document, so.
Yep.
While you may not directly approve this person receiving this salary.
Right.
People who fill that position, you've approved a salary for them.
Okay, so it's a slight gray.
Yeah.
Well, we just make the X a little larger and kind of. And my other question was, it's in the first page, or no, wait, I don't know. My pages kind of got cut off. Yeah, it's the first one. Have select board members attended financial trainings? It's don't know. Should we be attending?
That's a good time for
There are certain trainings that are given throughout the year, and some of them are worth looking into. I can, let you know when those are taking place and what topics they're covering, and you guys can make a decision whether you think you'd like to go. Staff, we belong to the Vermont Government Finance Officers Association, and they do 3 workshops a year and cover various subjects. And so I'll keep my eye open for those. They're always here in the state, and they're very inexpensive to go to, $50, something of that nature. And it's just a day training on various topics. And so I can let you know when those are taking place, and you can make a decision whether you think it's appropriate.
The League of Cities and
Thank you.
Towns also provides some training, but I have to say that the best training I've had is asking John questions. Really, because, I mean, it's immediately applicable, so you retain the learning, and the first few times I saw this annual thing, I asked a whole bunch of questions. Now I don't.
So here's my question, and it may be a silly one, but you mentioned that there were areas where you had to say no, you wish it was yes. And you probably already are, do you guys keep track of those areas that you'd like to improve so that you can measure up against every year if there's any move in the metric?
Yeah, let me give you an example so you can understand what I'm talking about. So down in the treasurer's office, they send out the bills as well as collect the cash and checks coming in and enter all that information into our accounting system. And under an ideal situation, if we had the staffing, number one, the people that are entering the information into the accounting system wouldn't also be making the deposits at the bank.
Right.
And they also would not be the people that would be mailing out the bills. So there's a segregation there that we, because of our staff size, we simply can't accommodate. And, but we have controls and, on it, and, other ways that we double check each other, and, so it's not a huge exposure, but in an ideal situation, it would be better if those jobs were segregated.
So
That's
they're
the
just
kind of
minor examples
Minor things
of that
like
type
that.
of thing.
thing. Yep.
Thank you.
Anybody else, any questions? Anyone in the public have any questions? Would someone like to make a motion?
I move that we authorize the chair to sign the financial management questionnaire, towns and cities, the municipal checklist for internal control, part 1, cash controls, and the municipal checklist for internal control, part 2, other controls relating to cash or risk.
All right, we have a motion. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Thank you, John, very much.
You're welcome, Kate.
Next up is our certification of no appeal or suit pending that we're being asked to sign by the town assessor. I can explain this if you want. Do you know more about it than I do, Patrick?
It's pretty straightforward.
Right. Basically, we're signing on to something that says no one is appealing or suing to say that they owe taxes to the town.
Absolutely. This is another piece of business that comes up every year where the board is asked to certify that there are no additional lawsuits pending about last year's grand list. And with the conclusion of the Marcraft appeal on the Exit 1 Center recently, we're now ready to recommend that the board approve this certification.
Anyone on the board have any questions about this? Anyone in the public have any questions? Would someone like to make a motion?
Sure. I'll make a motion to approve the certification of no appeal or suit pending as presented.
We have a motion to approve the certification of no appeal or suit pending as presented. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Next up is we're being asked to award a bid for paving on East Orchard Street. Do you want me to throw this over to you, Patrick?
Absolutely. So you'll notice in your board packet, there's a memo from Public Works Director Steve Barrett. The town recently put out to bid a small stretch of paving on East Orchard Street between Upper Dummerston Road and Gibson Road. The town received 5 bids. The lowest bid came in at $34,684.50 from Johnson Asphalt and Paving, a company we've worked with before, and so we recommend your approval for the low bid for East Orchard Street.
Now, is this there's a huge discrepancy, there's like 14,000. Is this the company that has their own asphalt? Is that, or am I making that up? Isn't there a company? Remember we used to be able to get bids for lower from some company because they had their own asphalt?
I don't know Johnson well enough.
Okay.
I know Steve Barrett was very pleased with them.
Okay.
We've worked with them in the past, and certainly their bid value was very favorable.
Yeah.
As to whether or not they have their own
Okay.
asphalt plant, I don't know.
Okay.
I seem to recall Steve telling us that
I think,
at a previous meeting.
yeah, that's what I think, because it's 14,000 between the first and high, so it's got to be something like that.
It
Yeah.
could well be.
Okay. Any questions about that?
I have a question. So when I think about repaving, I think about the question around maintaining, eventually then having to maintain a road. Like I'm thinking of Western Avenue and, so what, and also the question of what are we, I mean, you guys were talking about maybe this might be the company that has their own asphalt plant, but what are we losing by going cheaper? Beyond just the price tag.
I think in this instance, given the experience that the town has had with this particular company, I think there's really no reason to go with anything more expensive. The particular piece of road which is to be paved is, just to be clear, is not going from gravel to asphalt, but has been asphalt all along.
Okay.
And it's on the list of roads which are in about as poor condition as, it's at the top of the priority list.
It's close to being gravel.
Well, that's probably
Or
another
should
way
be
to put it.
gravel.
So,
But I hear what Shanta says too, and I agree with that. And
I think in some cases, like Lane Construction is a really large company, and their bid is in very round figures. And I think part of it is because they've got lots of work, and if they can get a good price, they'll do the job for us. But they're not as interested as, like, if you look at Mitchell, Bays, and Johnson, they're within $4,000 of each other, within 10%, the 10% range. So it's just.
Does that answer your question at all, Shanta?
Yeah, I think
Good
it
comment,
answered.
though. You're talking about quality over.
Yeah, to make sure that we're not like bartering away something in exchange for
Cheaper.
Yeah.
I think a lot of us have a lot of faith in the past and the great way that Steve and the whole crew have evaluated companies.
Absolutely.
So-
Yeah.
Yep, I think their recommendation is sound.
Any other questions? Anyone in the public have any questions about our awarding a bid for paving East Orchard?
Sorry.
Oh, you're so excited.
I was done with that.
Would someone like to make a motion?
Sure. I will move to award a bid in the amount of $34,684.50 to Johnson Asphalt Paving of Northfield, Vermont for East Orchard Street paving.
We have a motion to award a bid in the amount of $34,684.50 to Johnson Asphalt Paving. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Up next is the financing for the aerial ladder truck. If everyone remembers, in March at town meeting approved the purchase of the ladder truck, $500,000 in borrowing, $450 in cash, and the town staff was going to look for us and figure out what's the best way to borrow. And I think that's what, John, you're going to talk to us tonight
Yep.
about.
So the first thing we did several months ago is file an application with the Vermont Municipal Bond Bank. And it's a pretty extensive application. And the bond bank will be going out to actually issue the bonds in July, mid-July. And so when they go out and do that, they really don't know the rate they're going to come up with. So the only thing we can get right now from the bond bank is an indicative rate of what is the rate on a 10-year bond at this point in time. So I called the bond bank and got that rate, and it was 2.547% at the time I did this analysis. After filing that application with the bond bank, we talked about possibly going out and getting bids from several banks. And the reason we wanted to do that is that the banks can be a lot more flexible, both on the payment schedule, the ability to prepay the loan, things of that nature just make it a lot more flexible than the bond bank. Once you issue a bond, that's it. And unless the bond bank decides to refinance the whole series, you're stuck with it. You can't make a decision to refinance. So we did recently go out and get bids from 4 banks, and they were very competitive. As you can see, I have them summarized at the bottom of the memo here, and we start out with Brattleboro Savings and Loan. They came in with a 10-year loan term at a fixed rate of 2.32%. And that's 10 years, so that's pretty amazing in this rate environment right now where we're seeing those rates go up. Community Bank bid 3.22%, and both of these allow prepayments, of course. And People's Bank bid 3.35%, and they allowed prepayment after 7/3/2023. And then finally, TD Bank came in at 4.2%. So I'm recommending to you that we go with Brattleboro Savings and Loan with their proposal and withdraw our application from the bond bank and get the various loan documents, which you will then sign before we close on the loan, which I've scheduled for July 2nd. And that allows us to make a payment on the truck by July 15th and avoid any further price escalation on the vehicle. And so I think this will work out very well for us, and that's my recommendation.
Great, thank you. Does anyone have any questions or comments?
I'm pleased.
Seems wise.
Seems like the local bank
Yep.
knew that they wanted a relationship and
Let's
they
get-
priced accordingly, and
Let's get
good for
the
them.
ink on the line, on the
Yeah.
dotted line.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does anyone in the public have any comments? Nope. Yeah.
Yeah, oh, that's the best comment ever. Ron,
We'll
give us
applaud John
applause.
O'Connor.
Nice job.
Seeing none, would someone like to make a motion?
I'd like to make a motion. I'd like to make the motion to withdraw the application to the Vermont Municipal Bond Bank and to approve a 10-year note at an interest rate of 2.32% with Brattleboro Savings and Loan.
We have a motion to withdraw the application to the Vermont Municipal Bond Bank and approve a 10-year note at the rate of 2.32% with Brattleboro Savings and Loan. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Thank you very much, John.
Yeah, that was great.
And thanks, Brattleboro
Thank
Savings
you.
and Loan.
Yes.
Okay, next up is the discussion about the police fire facilities project. And just as a way of background, there's slightly over $300,000 left in the fund that funded the police fire facilities project. The committee that has been overseeing that project has looked at what the needs are and come to us with some recommendations on where to spend the money. Part of it is for a carport at the police station, fixing the roof at the police station, and some dispatch equipment for the fire station. Tonight, the action we're being asked to take is to authorize the spending of up to, or not to exceed, $10,000. So a plan, or to see how much, how to build the carport. Yeah, how to build the carport. So that's what we're being asked tonight. We're not being asked to take any action on the other things. Ultimately, the other projects are going to have to be approved by town meeting because it is using money that we bonded for. So, do you want anything else to say, Patrick, or?
I think you nailed it.
Okay. So I don't know if anyone has any questions or comments about us approving the use of up to $10,000 to make a plan to build a carport.
And that would be from the surplus in the
Well,
police fire account?
that is the question.
Yeah. That's why.
Because Brandy and I had that exact same question, and the answer to that is,
The answer to that is we need to use general fund dollars for this particular expenditure, but it can be refunded from bond proceeds after we get approval from town meeting.
Yeah. I think I'd like to, well, I actually had talked with Peter about this a week or so ago, to find out if we had to use that $300,000 on capital or could we use it on other things. Because there are a lot of things that we would like to do or that we're trying to do that we don't have resources for. And he didn't get back to me specifically about whether we can go outside of that or not, but we talked about a lot of other projects, and I think it would be worth our while to think about where else we might spend this money. And just so that we're sure that we want to spend the $150,000 for the carport might not be better put into the regular budget as an improvement. And the reason that I want us to look at it that way and look at other options for how we might spend this $300,000. Well, no, I think we have to do the roof, but the 200 and some that's left is that this was never, when there was going to be the police were going to be in this building, there was no carport in the plan. And when the plan for Putney Road came along, there was no carport in it. And I'm pretty sure, I mean, you can never know, how the town's going to vote or how the select board's going to vote, but I'm pretty sure that the carport $150,000 carport would have been one of the first things that would have been removed from the bid. So it's not something that should be there all along. I think it is a part of the project, it's an important part, and I think the chief made an airtight argument in the documents last meeting for why we should have the carport. So I'm not saying we shouldn't have it. But I'm saying that I think we might want to look at other priorities and consider if there are other things that we can use that money for, where else we might use that $300,000.
and I just,
And I don't have any suggestions or ideas of where, I just would like to have a look at it. And if we put 10,000, so I'd rather wait to put the 10,000 into the design.
right, well, that's my follow-up to that is, and I don't know if Patrick, you can answer that, why are we doing the planning and design for a carport now when it can't be approved until March? And why aren't we doing the planning, if we need the roof so badly? And in this memo, Steve Horton says, oh, their cost estimates are old and we should have updated. It should be updated before the select board makes a final approval. Why aren't we getting estimates on the roof now? Like, why is this carport being done now? I mean, that's just sort of, I'm sort of,
Yeah.
I've been thinking about it through the day, and I'm going, why are we getting an estimate on the carport now when we don't know the town meeting's going to approve it? And if the roof is so important, why aren't we getting an estimate on that now?
All right, why don't I see if I can answer that? So the short answer is we are working on getting an estimate on the roof. The estimate that we have is several years old. It's not going to cost us anything in order to obtain a new estimate to do roof repair. We need to get a roofing contract out there, and I believe Steve Horton's in the midst of doing that now. So we think we can update the estimate for the roof and to do so without a whole lot of expense. The carport, which Dave's right, was not a absolutely crucial component of the police department project. It's certainly been on the,
Yeah.
very desirable component of the police department project since the very beginning. But because it's had that status and had that status for quite some time, it's never actually been examined in any detail. There's no real scope, there's no real design, there's no real plan for how that particular carport would be constructed at that site. So the reason we're looking at this now is if the board is interested in potentially recommending, potentially following through with the recommendations from the Police Fire Committee and making a recommendation from this board to representative town meeting, then we think it'd be worthwhile for us to have a really good, clear sense as to what that carport is going to cost. And at this point in time, it's really just been sort of a, good bit of money. Could be 150, could be 100, we really don't know. So if the board is supportive of investigating this in order to be able to have a really good, clear sense as to what that project's going to cost, then you can make a decision about whether or not it's something you wish to take to town meeting or whether, something else, as you mentioned, could be something entirely different.
Just to confuse a little bit more, the Police Fire Committee has been making recommendations all along, and we've been considering them and supporting them, and they really are knowledgeable, and they're making this recommendation, and it's kind of like, why do we have them if we don't pay attention to their recommendations? So, but you don't expect to have, there's usually, or not usually, but in the past, there has been a conflict with the engineers or the contractor or somebody, and if there's any leftover money, it winds up just getting split and disappearing. And this isn't going to happen. We're going to have $300,000 here. So I just wanted to take a little more time to look at it. But I understand that if we don't know what a carport is going to cost, then we can't even consider taking it to town meeting or anything else.
Now, who would do the estimate for us? Do we already have somebody picked out?
We do not yet.
So how do you pick that person?
I'm discussing that with Steve Horton at the present
I
time.
mean, is that something you bid out, or is it just too little?
Request for
You
proposals.
it's a fairly small sum. It's less than 10,000. I'm gonna work with Steve to try and identify how we can get what's the most cost-effective way to move forward. I'm not sure we need to do a full design. We might end up in the end spending just a little bit of money, getting a clear sense as to what it's going to cost, and then doing a design build.
And that's what I was about to ask, is it design build?
I think I wouldn't be surprised if we end up doing design build. But
That's if we decide to do the carport. And it's actually,
It all-
that's if town meeting decides to do the carport.
Well, the other thing though is we don't have to wait till March. If we decide we want to go ahead with it, we can have a special town meeting.
That's right, we
and
could.
And get it approved and get it
Yeah.
underway in
Yeah.
July.
Yeah,
Well, maybe not by July, but.
yeah. All right. So tonight, our decision is, do we authorize the spending of up to $10,000 to complete a plan, put a plan
I think
together?
we should. despite all the things that I said.
No,
But I just want to,
Nice,
put that whole
David.
scope
No,
out
it's good to
there.
put it out there, because I was thinking the same thing about the roof. Let me ask you, if we do this, can we put it in the motion that we want the $10,000 to go from the police and fire fund back to the general fund, or do we just trust that someone's gonna do that? Because I wholeheartedly agree that the general fund should not be paying this $10,000.
Right.
And it should
I do
come
too.
from the police fire fund.
I absolutely agree.
So do we have to say
Given-
that?
It's certainly abundantly clear.
We want it back.
And I agree with her, so.
And it's just that, given the timing of things, we're coming up pretty close to a limit in our spending ability, in our authority for spending at 62 Black Mountain Road. So,
But I thought
This-
I thought we can't spend any of the 62 Black Mountain Road money.
exactly, and so the carport would be at 62 Black Mountain Road. So if we authorize additional spending from bond proceeds at 62 Black Mountain Road.
But
we're gonna-
what I'm saying is, maybe I'm not saying what I'm saying. Like tonight, we say 10,000, it's gonna come from the general fund.
Yep.
What I'm saying is, when we switch, I know there's like the 64,000 or whatever,
Yeah.
if we have to go to town meeting.
Yep.
When we go to town meeting can authorize this 10,000 from the police fire project to be put back into the general fund if,
I think
you see
so.
what I'm saying?
I think absolutely.
Yeah, okay, that's what I'm saying.
Yes, so the
So we don't
plan
have-
would be, the general fund needs to carry this cost today.
Yeah.
But eventually, once we go back to town meeting, we would use bond proceeds to reimburse the general fund.
Right, and we have to reimburse for the 64,000
Yep.
that we overdid the last time.
Yep. Yep.
Okay. Does that
So
make
there's-
sense? I don't know if Shanta was involved in this whole
I was.
$64,000 overspend.
But I get it.
You got it? Okay.
Yeah, I'm quick, I got
Okay.
it. But, yeah, I agree with what everybody else is saying.
It's annoying, but then we'll get a price.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Kate will
makes
design
sense.
it.
I support the
I've designed
carport.
it right
Kate
now.
already did design it. That's
I
my
was thinking
bottom.
we just get John, ask John how much he'd want to put it up, and we'd be all set, and skip all this other stuff.
Yeah. Does anyone in the public have any questions about us spending an amount not to exceed $10,000 to complete the planning and design work for a carport at the police station? Nope. Is anyone interested in making a motion or ready to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to authorize the town manager to expend an amount not to exceed $10,000 for technical services to design and develop cost estimates for a carport at 62 Black Mountain Road.
We have a motion to authorize the town manager to expend an amount not to exceed $10,000 for technical services to develop cost estimates for a carport. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries 5-0. The next is we're being asked to disband the Police Fire Facilities Building Committee. As everybody is well aware, how long is this committee? 5 years?
What is it, 2013?
They're
Yeah.
begging for this, huh?
This current committee has been serving, for 5 years now, and they were asked really to be the public's eyes and ears on the process of the building, the police fire facilities as it went through. Now that it's complete, their work has been done, so we are being asked to disband the committee. And I just want to say, the motion is very dry, saying let's just disband the committee, but I think we should all just take this opportunity to thank everybody who's been on this committee for all those years, because it has not been easy.
Yeah.
And it ended up working very, very well.
Thank you for all of your hard work.
Yeah. So I don't know if somebody would like to make a motion.
I move to disband the Police Fire Facilities Building Committee.
Oh, I think I should want to add a friendly amendment, and thank them for their service.
And thank them for their service.
Would
Yeah,
thank
with
them?
it? Yes,
With our thanks.
absolutely.
Yep. So we have a motion to disband the Police Fire Facilities Committee and thank them for their service. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Motion carries 4-0. One of us has left the room for a moment. Next, we're being asked to approve a bulletproof vest or a grant from the Bureau of Justice Assistance for a bulletproof vest grant for the police department. And that's in the amount of $1,598. I don't know if Patrick has anything he wants to say about this.
Nothing other than the grant funds will be used to purchase bulletproof vests.
Is there any matching town funds, or is this just flat out?
You know, I believe it's a 50-50 match.
Oh, I can look at the thing.
He actually is.
Yep.
Yes, it is.
50/50
Oh, yeah,
match.
it is.
Does anyone have any questions about this grant application? No. Anyone in the public have any questions? Would somebody like to make a motion?
I'd like to make a motion to authorize an application for the Bureau of Justice Assistance Grant in the amount of $1,598 to the U.S. Department of Justice for the purchase of bulletproof vests.
We have a motion to authorize an application for a Bureau of Justice Assistant grant so we can purchase bulletproof vests for the police department. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries 4-0. Once again, one of us is out of the room. Next up is a request by town staff for $15,000 to begin some design work at Union Station, which is the Amtrak station down at the museum. And I don't know, Patrick, do you want to explain why the town is asking for this money, and why we're in the situation we're in?
Absolutely. So we're seeking these funds in part to respond to U.S. Department of Justice request that we bring the train station up to full compliance with the ADA. And so just to give a little bit of background, the town acquired Union Station back in 1972. Almost immediately thereafter, we began leasing the property to the Brattleboro Museum and Arts Center. However, even at the time of purchase, the space downstairs in the basement was being occupied for a train service and was the home of Amtrak. As many folks will recall, back in the early 2000s, there was a very large capital project that the town had undertaken called the Multimodal Transportation Project. And that had many sites as part of the project. It included the Brattleboro Transportation Center. It included the Whetstone Pathway, which is the means by which people can park at the transportation center and walk their way down to Union Station. It included the Depot Street parking lot, which was built. And initially, it had planned for fairly comprehensive station improvements. There's some plans that have been included in the backup for the board that sort of show what that station improvement project was intending to accomplish. We still think it's a great project. Unfortunately, in the early 2000s, cost overruns on earlier elements of the project meant that the Union Station improvements had to be shelved. And so shelved they have been for many years until somewhat recently, when the town reached out to Amtrak to begin talking about the condition of the train station. And what we learned was that Amtrak was very interested in making some improvements to the train station on the outside, not internal to the building, but on the outside. They intend to construct a level platform. They intend to install area lighting and to do a variety of improvements to protect the safety of pedestrians, installing a sidewalk next to the building, and in redesigning the space in order to provide full ADA accessibility on the outside of the train station. What they let us know early on was that if this was to proceed, that the town, because we are the owner of the museum property, would be obligated to provide ADA improvements on the inside. And that they were doing this action under an order from the U.S. Department of Justice. Not long after we spoke with Amtrak, the U.S. Department of Justice reached out to the town of Brattleboro and said, it's come to our understanding that you own the train station, and can you speak to us a little bit about your plans to make improvements? Well, we had developed a very positive working relationship with Amtrak. We had learned a little bit about the plans that they were moving forward with. They have provided the town with very extensive analysis of the inside of the station and the faults that it has in terms of its accessibility. And so we are staying in close contact both with Amtrak and with the Department of Justice to let them know about the steps that we're hoping to take to remedy some of these deficiencies. Included also in the board packet was a timeline. It's a preliminary timeline. It's been reviewed by the U.S. Department of Justice, and they feel pretty comfortable with it. And it's just taking step by step how we see the project moving forward. At this time, we're seeking the not to exceed sum of $15,000 to secure some technical assistance with the eye towards developing realistic cost estimates for addressing the ADA challenges at that site. But we're also going to take the time to take a second or a new look at the older station improvement projects and try and figure out how close, if we do all these ADA improvements, how close are we getting to that old project? And what's the gap between the two? And if the gap is not that extensive, then, you know, we'll begin to be bringing forward grant applications, maybe for some grant funding to try and conduct a station improvement project there that we think would help Brattleboro to put its best foot forward in terms of train travel.
And tonight, we're only being asked for the $15,000 to help with the technical aspects. There's going to be more money, as you said, needed to actually do this.
Yes.
And according to the timeline for everybody out who doesn't have this would be completed, taking out of the whole parking site work. The construction would be finished in March of 2020. So this is not something we're going to do tomorrow. And obviously, this is all like dependent on funding, but the Department of Justice is basically saying we have to do this, so.
They're very insistent about the ADA improvements.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And there was a group, what was that, Patrick, a year and a half ago, it seems like forever ago now, that there are people that were interested in helping us fix the inside of that train station.
Absolutely.
Just on an aesthetic level, because I don't know if anybody's been in it.
I have. I take the train often to New York.
Yeah.
It's actually not friendly.
It's awful.
Yeah.
They basically have gone and gotten the chairs. I give the person who works down there lots of credit.
Right.
Because she's been extremely creative. Like, she'll go to tag sales and get like chairs that look the same. You know, I mean, she's really creative, but it's just not what you want.
And also for someone in a wheelchair, like the narrow hallway.
You can't get in.
It's problematic, yeah.
So just on basic level, the ADA stuff has to happen. But then there's that, as Patrick said, what can we get from it that makes it better?
Well, it's also discouraged. People wanted to come to Vermont with their bikes, and you can't really get the bike on or off the train.
No.
You know, there's a lot that needs to happen there.
So does anybody have any questions on the board? Questions or comments? It's important. Anyone in the public have any questions and comments about what we're talking about? Would anyone like to make a motion to authorize the $15,000 so we can get the project started?
Sure, I'll make a motion to authorize the town manager to expend an amount not to exceed $15,000 for technical services to develop conceptual plans that address accessibility and other deficiencies at Union Station.
We have a motion to authorize the town manager to expend an amount not to exceed $15,000 for the technical improvements at Union Station. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Next up is the discussion on the fiscal year 2019 parking fund budget. Tonight, what we're planning to do is have a discussion, have the staff, Patrick, whomever, if there's anything we want more information on, and then hopefully approve it at the next meeting if we're ready to do so. Last meeting, we had our parking consultant came in and gave us the Reader's Digest version of the very long and thick downtown parking study that was done, and I know he made some recommendations that we were all interested in talking about. So I don't know, Peter, Patrick. Peter's the one that always, yeah, Peter. If you want to run through the budget with us, is that what you'd like to do?
Yeah, I'd love to. So if I could just start by emphasizing one really important point, I think, which is that the parking fund in the town of Brattleboro is what's called an enterprise fund, meaning that it is managed as a business. Its revenue sources are derived from the operations of the parking system and do not benefit from any local property taxes. It's strictly revenues earned, and the expense side of the budget is managed against revenues earned. So it's an important place to sort of start the discussion. The proposed fiscal 19 parking fund budget, which is before you, has revenues of $849,800. It is largely the same, I would say, from previous years, with one really notable exception, that being parking fines or citation revenue. We've dropped that down by $30,000 to level out at $170,000. And the reason for that is, while we've been budgeting for $200,000 for the last couple of years, we're just consistently missing that mark and missing it by a good deal. So the $170,000 figure, which is shown in the proposed budget, was arrived at by a 5-year average of citation revenues. So it is a reduction, but we think it's what it really represents is a more realistic budget number. On the expense side, again, things are more or less very consistent from year to year. I know there is a reduction in staff salaries. I think it's possible that in recent years we have overestimated for that. There are only 4 staff persons in the parking fund, and so it's pretty easy to be able to do a individual by individual calculation. And we're really confident that these budget numbers, as they relate to staff salaries, overtime, Social Security, health insurance, all the various expenses of staff, are very accurate. There is one significant reduction, that being from liability insurance. And what's going on there is the town's insurer, which is the Vermont League of Cities and Towns, has altogether restructured how they allocate liability insurance. This had an impact on the general fund. This is its impact here in the parking fund. And that's a very favorable, for the parking fund, alteration. And then what I would also like to point out is snow removal. Now, watching the parking fund year in, year out, the success of the fund is almost entirely based on the snow removal line item. If we've had a really good year, it's likely because there wasn't a whole lot of snow. If we had a really not so good year, it's because there was a ton of snow. That's really the line that sort of makes or breaks the parking fund. And what we've noticed, once again, is that we've been a little bit under budgeting that expense. And so we've added $10,000 to that, raising it up to $90,000. And the reason we made that particular adjustment is, once again, it's based on the 5-year average of snow removal expenses. If we hit the mark on budget in terms of revenues and expenses, we anticipate that this particular year, fiscal 19, would generate about $72,000 in additional cash for the parking fund.
Which is not very much money, in case anybody wonders.
Not a whole lot. If there are no questions on that, or if there are, I'm happy to try and answer them. If there aren't, we can talk a little bit about cash on hand and capital projects. It's up to you.
Can I ask the dumbest question ever?
You haven't heard mine yet.
This is so dumb, and it's probably not even worth me asking because it's really dumb. But the snow removal in the parking lots, it's so dumb. You know how
The town has these snow plows and trucks.
No, you know how you have the big, like in High Grove, there's that big pile of snow. Is that all from the parking lots, or does that come from somewhere else?
No, that's a parking lot.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I just didn't know if we were taking the parking fund was removing snow from like somewhere else because it happened to be plopped in the parking lot.
Right. No, they're definitely segregated. And there's a giant
Okay.
pile that builds up in the back of the
Well, that's
municipal
it.
center,
Okay.
and there's a giant pile that builds up.
Okay.
And
So like that municipal center pile is removed by like the highway, public, DPW funds?
By DPW,
Okay.
by contract with DPW.
Okay,
I
yeah.
don't know, Kate. That's kind of dumb, but you could do better.
No, David's gotta do
Yeah,
that right
here's
now.
my attempt, okay? So the revenue here is $849,800, and the expenses are $777,000, which means that we're gonna have $72,000 more revenue than expense. And the year-end beginning cash balance is $154,755. If you add those up, it's $226,000, right? That seems like should be available. I know you've got a reserve fund here, recommendation here and stuff, but it seems like if there's $77,000, and if the expenses are gonna be less than the revenue, shouldn't we think about that as money to spend on things like parking meters?
So,
Does that segue into what you want to talk about next?
yeah, there are two things. There are two different dates, and they're spread apart by years. So the little table that John put together to forecast cash on hand at the end of the fiscal year is our best guess for June 30 of 2018. And the addition of $72,000, if in fact it occurs, would be by June 30 of 2019. One thing to keep in mind is, we said early on, is that this is an enterprise fund that needs to stand on its own and cannot rely upon property taxes. John's done an analysis to try and assess where he thinks our cash position is going to be by the close of this fiscal year. It's, as you pointed out, coming in at about $147,000. Staff would recommend that 100 out of that 147,000 be set aside, which really represents about 6 weeks of operating income for the parking fund. It's a small fund. It has no other sources of revenue to be able to depend upon. So we would recommend that we leave 100,000 in the parking fund to, secure other obligations in case there's a problem of some kind, and that would free up $47,000.
Can I ask you a question? Is it 47 or 54?
Is it 54?
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
sorry.
yeah, okay. I
I'm
just wanna make
sort
sure
of
we're on-
going from memory here.
No,
on
no,
that.
I just want to make sure we're on the same page.
Yep, no, you're
Yeah.
absolutely right. It's
Okay.
54,755.
Yeah, okay.
So staff would recommend that that 54,755 could be used for capital improvements. There are a great many needs in the parking fund. Many of its assets are dated and not always in the best of repair, even though the parking study actually did compliment the parking system for having its infrastructure in good working order. With that 54,000, staff will likely recommend 2 weeks from tonight, if it's feasible, that we do a replacement of the upper deck stairs at the Brattleboro Transportation Center on the western side. As the board will recall, a couple of years ago, we had to replace the entire eastern stairs at the Brattleboro Transportation Center because they were rusting out. The same situation, although not exactly as bad, is happening on the western side. It is as bad when it comes to the top flight of those stairs. We are seeking estimates on a stair replacement project of fairly limited scope, just that top run at the transportation center. And if that can be accomplished reasonably for this $54,000, that will likely be staff's recommendation. If that looks as if it will be inadequate, staff will likely recommend that we do a paving project at the Preston lot. As you'll recall, we did some significant improvements to the parking lots last year, rebuilt the Harmony lot, rebuilt the Harris Street lot. In order to be able to afford both of those projects, we had to sacrifice the Preston lot, and it's in pretty rough shape. So that would likely be the second recommendation. Just so that the board is aware, we're also trying to begin the process of putting some numbers to some of the other recommendations that came out of the parking study. Things like applying reflective paint in the transportation center or possibly reworking the lighting. I don't expect that we're going to be able to fully cost out those in the next 2 weeks, but I want to make sure that everyone is aware that those things aren't getting lost, and they will eventually find their way into the capital replacement program.
Can I ask a question?
Of course.
And I know this is part of the memo, but I'm going to bring it up now. This capital plan for the parking fund talks nowhere about meter heads. So it's a glaring omission, but I know it's mentioned in your memo. So do you want to talk about that now?
Sure. It actually, last year, when the board took a look at that, it had considerable amount of money in there.
Right.
In this year for the replacement of meter heads. And that's a beautiful transition because, Kate, you and I were both parties to the parking study as it moved forward. I know I got a pretty clear indication that transitioning our parking meters from the basic coin-operated meter heads that we have today to smart meters was going to be a hot topic. That was made evident right away. And so we've been looking into that for a couple of months now. And we think we've come up with what is a pretty creative way to make a transition to smart meters and to do so in the relatively near future. What we have seen in each of the communities that has gone through this type of transition in the past from regular coin-operated meters to smart meters is they regularly enjoy an increase in parking meter revenue. Not sure exactly what the psychology is there, or whether it's just that people have less coinage in their pockets than they used to, but they all have debit cards and they all have credit cards. And so if you come to town and you pull up to a parking meter and you throw your card in there, why not max it out, make sure I don't get myself a parking ticket. I'm not sure entirely if that's the reason, but there's a very clear trend that installing smart meters will lead to increased parking meter revenue. What that would enable us to do potentially is to use the increment in between the standard revenue that we've been fairly consistently gathering and the increased revenue to repay a note. But let me first talk just a little bit about procurement. So there is a practice called cooperative purchasing that is a feasible option within our purchasing policies. You'll notice that every year the town will acquire vehicles that have been procured through state bid. And so the town's procurement will just piggyback on the state's procurement, and we get very favorable pricing without having to go through the process of an RFP. On certain occasions, the town will endorse the use of procurement performed by a far away outside entity as long as it's being performed by a governmental entity and it's being performed at the same standards as our procurement, which means it needs to be publicly noticed to sort of maximize competition. They need to use sealed bids, and those bids need to be opened publicly. In the last couple of years, we've done that a couple of times with fire trucks. The rescue pumper comes to mind. That was procured via the Houston-Galveston area coalition of governments. In this instance, what's called the Region 14 Education Service Center in Abilene, Texas, did a procurement for smart meters nationwide, and IPS Group of San Diego, California, was awarded a contract for smart meters. And locally, what's kind of nice is that there are some examples of a couple of different Vermont municipalities that have made use of this particular procurement that was Woodstock, Vermont, and Montpelier, Vermont. And if you've been up to either of those towns recently, you'll notice they have really nice, very functional smart meters. Staff would propose that Brattleboro do the same. These meters can be acquired for $472.50, and that's purchased, installed, and delivered. We have 175 such parking meters, and so the cost for this entire transition is about $83,000. Okay. What staff would recommend is that the parking fund borrow for the $83,000 to make the transition, so that we could do that transition quickly, probably this summer, and that we borrow not from a financial institution, but from the utility fund. There is more than adequate cash on hand in the utility fund. We've had a conversation with Public Works, and they're not particularly concerned with tying up $83,000, or at least a portion of that over 5 years. What we would do is bring a proposal back to the select board for them to approve. Attorney Fisher and Finance Director John O'Connor and I have looked at this. If we clearly articulate the plan and the board approves it, that would be adequate documentation for our auditors. And that would provide the parking fund with all the cash it needs to make this transition and to make it quickly. And it would also, in turn, provide the utility ratepayers with additional interest income. We'd likely propose to use the same 2.32 interest that was granted locally. We think that would make sense. And if we were to go down this road, we could transition to smart meters very quickly. And do so without having to wait for our cash on hand to build up.
Here's another potentially stupid question. Is it possible for us, rather than to borrow from an institution, to just borrow from our own reserve and pay ourselves back and not have to pay interest? Either from the town's reserve or from the 100,000 that's for reserve here.
I believe borrowing from the 100,000 would be a challenge, because that is the 100,000. I mean, that's the buffer that keeps the fund afloat. But borrowing from the utility fund is, I think, a very reasonable option. It could be done at no interest, but it also could be done with some interest. I think what we were contemplating is to just piggyback on that same low interest rate, and then the ratepayers in the utility fund would receive some nominal benefit for providing the cash to the parking fund.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I have things to say.
Really?
Yeah, I do. Like, I want to be able to wrap my head around this, but I can't, because I have some anxiety points that are kind of clogging my head. And I almost wish that, we had the meeting last time where the presentation was given to us, and while we could have had a really full-body discussion at that time, we had a very packed agenda, and so we had the discussion we could have. I really think that we need to have a comprehensive discussion about parking in Brattleboro in general, about parking for bicycles, parking for motorcycles. I see that we have, a plan for the smart meters on the street, but I would like to discuss the idea about keeping an 85% occupancy on Main Street. And if we have meters that aren't being replaced in the lots, but we are replacing the meters on Main Street, then that seems counterintuitive to any idea like that with dynamic pricing. I also, myself and another woman, handed out several dollar bills at Highgrove Lot on Saturday because the machine decided it wasn't taking quarters anymore. So, to not have that as an immediate replacement stresses me out. So I almost feel like what we have is kind of a structural problem with parking in general in Brattleboro. And I appreciate the presentation that was given, but I would almost like the board and members of the community to be able to sit down and discuss all aspects of that before laying out or before looking at a capital plan, because I would hate for us to say like, let's do this, but then doing this makes it, let's replace these smart meters, but then doing that makes it so that we're not replacing the lot meters, which then is driving more parking to Main Street, which is then causing more of a congestion and leaving our lots in more of a deteriorate, like kind of, who wants to park there when the meters suck, basically. I mean, I don't. I do park there, but I'm annoyed. Every time I walk up, I'm like, do I have change? Which I never have, but I find it on the floor. And then when I get there with my change and it doesn't work, and I'm like, do I have a dollar bill, or does this woman getting out of her car have a dollar bill? Like, it starts to become,
Just to
and then
add
the
to that,
transportation painting and like,
just to pile on, the dollar machines and the, the pay and put your tag up, pay and put your tag in the car. If it's raining, the little ramp that the dollar goes in on is wet.
truth.
And the dollar gets wet and doesn't win. And it's just,
I've started leaving notes on my dashboard when
Yeah.
I can't pay to park.
and I think to add to what you were saying, Patrick, about the increase when you change the meters, I think if you make it easier for people to get time on the meter, they're gonna be more likely to come downtown. That's one of the pain in the neck things that people complain about when they complain about our parking. But, I had just, not even thinking as far as Brandy had gone, I had just kind of slid $12,000 over for one new pay box, card-related pay box in each of the lots that have those boxes, and one in the
Yeah.
transportation center as
Because
well.
the FY '21 is.
So,
I agree with
I think, but,
Brandy's point.
I think we need a more robust conversation.
Yeah, well, also too, I mean, I drive motorcycles and bicycles, and I can't, it's like, am I gonna get in trouble because I'm taking up a space with a motorcycle,
address
or,
that.
where I've attached my bicycle to all sorts of strange things, so.
So I almost want to see like the budget, the
Yeah.
ordinances, like I want to see, like I appreciate their study of what they did, and I think it was really informative, but for myself, I kind of almost want us to look at like, what are all ordinances pertaining to parking? What are all costs for parking meters, and have community discussion that looks at like which ordinances are outdated, which ones, are unenforceable, which one, whatever. And also look at which meters, refuse to take money. Do we want to have, dynamic pricing that leaves an 85%, occupancy rate on Main Street, but leaves always some slots open? I thought that was really smart. I need more. I
We
need
also-
more
yeah.
conversation time, and I need more of all of the pieces that go along with parking. Because we have such limited money, I want to make sure that it's covering more issues.
Well, I also want to look at creative ways to use space downtown. Like, that needs to be a part of that conversation as well. And
Yep.
how, I think there was an example that was attached last time that talked about the creative ways of using space with businesses if it were allowed. So,
Right,
I mean,
right.
that needs
Changing
to be.
signage on private businesses for after hours,
Exactly.
such as local banks.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, it's a larger conversation for sure.
What's up, Tim?
Is the board, generally, just as a reading of the board, is everyone feeling like we have to address all of these issues before addressing smart meters?
I don't know that's, well, what I'm saying is, we don't have a ton of money. And so I want to kind of have a better comprehensive look, because then we might say, yeah, we can throw most of the money at, these smart meters, but also these kiosks. And these ordinances we can just clean up, and we can just ask that person to do signage. And then when we're putting forth to the community a parking plan, it's a little more comprehensive than, well, we changed all the meter heads on Main Street, so that was good. Because that doesn't feel good enough to me.
I think yes, we are kind of
I'm
wanting
surprised.
to hold it up.
Well, I like to
I'm a little
surprise.
surprised,
I would
yeah.
like to surprise you.
I'm a little surprised because the general feeling of this big study we had done was quite positive, at least comparatively to other towns. And I'm surprised that the board wants to enter into, break open the entire package and
Because I think we're
rearrange
the ones
all
that
of the
park
parts.
here. So we park here. Like, those people were nice and they did a study of a select thing, but I'm handing out money at the meters. Like, I'm not finding parking on Main Street. I often have, wondered, can I or can I not park at this bank at 7 o'clock? Like, so I feel like that's kind of like real world. Like, I appreciate their study because it brought up things, but I'm the one that, and I say I because I can only speak for me, everybody does whatever, but I'm the one that uses the services, and I would say that some of them are pretty inadequate.
And also up north, the smart meters they have, they don't take Discover logo cards. So, I mean, there are interesting things to look at before we just jump on a bus to smart meters. My card was rejected. I had to use a different card. Smart meters, they work, they're great. But so I think just exploring a little bit more so we look at the whole plan of parking.
This kind of reflects the half a dozen comments that I got at the farmer's market the week after after we got and the first one, and they were all similar. The first one was, I'm so glad we spent all that money to have some experts come in and tell us we don't have any parking problems. Like, everything's fine. When everybody in town thinks, so obviously we're somehow, we're all just misunderstanding the planet when we get frustrated with parking issues in downtown. But I think things like bikes and motorcycles, the relationship with businesses, all of those things which were in the plan.
They were in the plan, right?
We need to be looking at those two as well as the staff's presentation for where we should start.
That's a good point. That's my thing, is the things that were already in the plan are the things I want to look at. So when we look at like motorcycle parking, bike parking, that's why I want to look at ordinances. The dynamic parking to address occupancy on Main Street and different pricing strategy was in the plan. So everything I want to look at was in the plan. I just don't want to throw money at anything until we've sat down without the time consumed by a presentation and pulled all the pieces of collateral together for the things recommended in the plan and look at them holistically.
All righty.
Can I ask, this is something else. When we're talking about what we have to fix at the transportation center, I want to put this on the table too, because you said, if it's too expensive, then we'll do Preston lot. So does that mean what we need to do at the transportation center is not earth-shatteringly vital? Because if we're saying, it's going to cost too much, we're not going to do it anyway, why is it the priority over the Preston lot? Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Sure, absolutely it does. What I would say is, I would consider it to be the highest priority because the condition of the uppermost stairwell is such that we've closed it off to the public. It's been shut down to protect the public safety. The question is really, can we get it fixed for the amount of money, for the amount of cash on hand that we have available? If it can't be, then, we may need to make a tough decision and to prioritize, the next most urgent need, which would be the condition of the Preston lot, and set aside whatever monies we are able to do to roll over to the next year where hopefully we can get everything taken care of.
Okay.
I think
There's one other point I'd like to make, going back to the smart meter discussion, which I is not going to resolve it's not going to resolve the full range of topics brought up here this evening. But I do think it's important to point out, in looking at the transition for smart meters, it was pretty clear that the increase in revenue from the smart meters on the 2-hour meters on Main Street that charge 75 cents an hour would provide adequate resources to be able to pay down the note to finance the transition. That's not exactly as clear when it comes to the kiosks in the surface lots, because the pricing is entirely different in those lots. In the short-term lots, it's 60 cents an hour, and in the long-term lots, it's 30 cents an hour. It's sort of priced in such a way to try and, make the most favorable locations, which are nearest to desirable destinations, be more expensive than the long-term lots, which are there for people who are parking and going to work all day. So we're not entirely sure that there's going to be enough margin there to be able to cover the cost of the transition of the kiosks. In speaking with the vendor, what they would propose to do would be to do a sort of pilot project with us and to make a transition with borrowed equipment, doing one in the short-term lot and one in a long-term lot, to be able to gather data for a couple of months so that we could then in the future, come back to the board and come back with some actual data that we could say, we think a transition is possible, and here's the schedule at which we could accomplish that kind of transition.
That's what I was gonna ask, like if there was any way to just test it, and would there be any cost to us to test that? Or it would just be borrowed equipment?
They would be willing to provide that for us, and to do that for a couple of months in order to gather data such that we could make more
So we can
informed
have a
decisions.
purchasing plan.
Yep.
Yeah, we'd still be purchasing from them, so, yeah.
Yep.
Now, can I just say one thing, and everyone will probably pounce on me in TV land? We all have our own, like, individual experiences parking, like, I get it, like, it's frustrating when you got that kiosk.
You can't get money in the
Right,
thing.
but we also had somebody who does parking studies for a living come in and do a parking study for us. And in addition to talking to people, they actually like stood and looked at a space and saw how many times it rotated over. So I think when we're looking at this, we can't lose sight of that. Do you know what I mean? I have my own parking frustrations, but there's a bigger issue. I don't want us to get lost in the like our own personal experience when, you know, there's somebody actually did this big study. I just
Let's not swap anecdotal for all the data that
Right.
we just acquired.
That's what I was trying to say. It sounds so smart
But
the way
his
you said
data
it.
brought up the recommendations. That is what I want to look into.
Right, I agree.
Sure. I think this is going to be super simple, but since some folks are wanting to zoom back a little bit and look at all aspects of parking, can I ask some simple, quick question? What does the parking revenue received go to paying? I have a general idea and a list I've started, but if we could just get that out there,
Yep.
that might be a good starting point for a conversation.
I think it's a fairly straightforward and simple answer to that question is it funds two things. It funds the operations of parking enforcement, all right? So that pays for a certain amount of salary and benefits for staff to operate and regulate the parking system. And then it pays for the maintenance and capital improvements of the physical assets. So that's all of the surface lots, that's all of the meter heads, that's the Brattleboro Transportation Center, that is the electric vehicle charging stations, that is all the kiosks, pay and display lot kiosks. So.
And paving, snow removal,
Yep,
debt service on the parking garage?
yes, absolutely.
So these are substantial things that if they weren't being paid for by revenue from the enterprise fund, they'd be paid for by taxpayers.
Absolutely. You know, the regulated parking system in town of Brattleboro accomplishes two things primarily. One, it keeps access to the most desirable parking spaces in constant rotation, right? So that you don't have a situation where someone's parked out in front of your business and they're there for 10 hours. So there's a constant rotation, which is accomplished by regulating parking. And then secondly, it keeps these expenses from being borne by the property taxpayers. And instead, it is borne by the users of the system.
I think it's that second point that I'll continually come back to.
Yes.
Reframe it every once in a while.
Emphasize it every
That's a good
opportunity.
point,
So I wonder, can we keep this section in our binders and come back to and have a look at the recommendations and come back to this at the next meeting?
Yeah, we're not gonna,
Absolutely.
I'm gonna go to the public, so don't worry about public. When do we have to approve the budget? Like, what's the drop dead date?
I would think, and I can confirm this with John, but I would believe the second meeting in June. It would have to be done in June in order to be
For
ready
the
for
fiscal
July.
year, yeah.
Right, so we have the June 5th meeting for another discussion about this. And then the next meeting is what, the 19th?
Yes.
And so on the 19th, we could approve a budget.
So what we would need would be budget approval. We could identify the amount of capital resources available for some sort of improvements, the 54,000, I think it was, and not necessarily decide right off what that's going to be spent on until maybe some further discussion has taken place. And the same thing with the smart meters.
Yeah, it's a public engagement.
That opportunity sits before us if and when we're ready to use it.
go to the public, and then we can continue our discussion. Anyone in the public like to make a thing?
Oh,
Stephanie?
look,
Everyone does.
finally.
Sorry. We had to-
Stephanie Bonin, Executive Director of Downtown Brattleboro Alliance. I want to make sure that I'm seen as the many, many merchants downtown and residents downtown and organizations and second floor office buildings, because I know that they did all want to be here, in that it's a priority issue for them. The second is I wanted to appreciate your question, Tim, about where does the money go? And it was brought up at our last board meeting just yesterday, I guess, talking about next year's parking promotions, because we do have that small budget that we allot for parking promotions. And that exact subject was brought up of, can we next year put in a piece of PR of where does the money go? Because for the public, it is often seen as we're paying simply to pay people to ticket us. And so I like that question, and I think that we're all on the same page of getting the word out on that. I really enjoyed reading the study, and I found it really informative on the path to take. And the 3 things I took away from it that we're advocating for is the credit card, the ability for credit cards, no brainer after reading that, and agree, no anecdotal, just study. Clear as day. Second was bike parking and alternative transportation and reading the study, it seemed like obviously linking it to offsetting a parking need, but the parking for bikes was the second most talked about subject. And then the third being lighting in the transportation center around public safety. And I would jump to any parking lot, not just, I know the study specifically said the transportation center, but public safety is coming up in many studies that are being done around town. So I would love to just say lots. I would urge you all to look at not necessarily doing the smart meters, and to be looking at the parking pass, the apps. I know enough information to be slightly dangerous here, but I tried to get enough information to convey to you why to look on that. So with the parking apps, you don't need to it's all about software and not about hardware. So that $83,000, which is a huge figure, would be $0. Because if I'm understanding right, these software companies would do the signage that goes smack right on the meter that already exists. No hardware. And that the way these businesses make money is from the transaction fees. So just like in our business, the merchant processing makes money, we don't. So that's exactly how. And I think they are extremely user-friendly and phenomenally inclusive, because you can still use your coins or your dollars. It's built so that the parking attendants will be able to, in real time, see how this person has paid. By the meter, the ticking meter, old school style, or by the app. I have lots of information to pass on to you all. And speaking of anecdotal, I just happened to be using it this weekend, and it was a lovely user experience as well. Right down to the foghorn sound that told me that my parking meter was up.
Huh.
So
On your phone?
it was great.
Can you pick the sound that tells you?
You'll send that along
I
to
bet
us?
you can.
Yeah.
Great, thank you, Stephanie.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
I think that's the next big chunk of information that we need before we do anything.
Hi, my name is Dave Cohen, and actually Stephanie said I should come here, and I thought that would be a great idea. So I represent 2 organizations, one of which is BCAT, which you should know about. It's a relatively new group, the Brattleboro Coalition for Active Transportation. It's a group of about 12 of us who are working on all kinds of issues around walking and biking in Brattleboro. Our first little victory is a sign at the Melrose Bridge that's going to say, on the eastbound lane may not pass bicyclists on bridge because many bicyclists have been afraid of riding that route. And my other, the organization I founded, it's called V-Bike, and V-Bike has a contract with V-Trans and through Go Vermont. Go Vermont is our state alternative transportation agency. We actually have it's a wonderful work. I do consultations with Vermonters around bicycle transportation and getting them on cargo bikes, a whole new range of technologies, electric assist bikes, and you're starting to notice them all around town. The shops are starting to carry them. So one of the things I wanted to address in this plan is one thing I noticed in Figure 15, support for alternative transportation initiatives. The kind of number one thing was dedicated bike lanes feeding into downtown Brattleboro. One of the things that's really restricting cyclists from coming in, of course, is that infrastructure and the lack of bike parking. People are always asking me, like, "Oh, Dave, where's the bike parking? You know, you want us to buy this big cargo bike? We don't have any place to put it, or we have to put it in some awkward spot." Or far away from where I'm going to be. So I think bike parking is really essential here, and not just bike parking. Because often when we think about a bike, you're thinking about what the bike industry has been selling, us in the U.S. for so long. These like little individual bikes, but now there are much larger bikes and carry 2 kids, 3 kids. We have even one that can carry 4 kids. One of the jobs of V-Bike is to have an entire fleet of bikes for people to try out. And we have a whole range of cargo bikes that folks are trying out. So just also expanding your notion of what a bike is, because you're going to start seeing these things way more all around town. And the other thing I would just throw out is like if you go to Burlington off of Church Street, there's wonderful bike parking, and it's actually, they took over a car parking space. I know that's really sacrilegious. I don't want to get anybody too up in arms about that, but it's an amazing way to provide sumptuous bike parking, is to take over a car parking space, and actually the bike rack kind of looks like a car. I don't know if any of you guys have seen it. It's really cool, and you'll find that in a number of cities. And the last thing that I'll say is that most cities are actually moving away from cars and congestion and towards pedestrian and bike access, and that means really great bike infrastructure. That means really first class bike parking. So we need that as much as we can around town, whether it's in the transportation center. It doesn't have to be centralized. We should have it all over the place, at least in my opinion. But it'd be great to have a really showpiece, kind of taking over one spot. I know a lot of people being up in arms about it, but it would provide massive amount of bike parking. So
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
If you wanted to send any stuff for us to browse through too,
Yeah,
I would love to read it.
Yeah, I'll send you actually the latest work that we're doing. Just so you know, is we. And it's one of the things that are listed in the alternative transportation initiatives. We just got the first subsidy for electric bikes in Burlington. It's only for Burlington residents through the Burlington Electric Department. So it's actually a subsidy for the purchase of electric bikes. Eventually, it's going to be a statewide thing, along with an entire lending library fleet for people to try out different kinds of bikes. So Burlington's going to be a real leader in that. But Brattleboro already is, because of all the work we've been doing locally.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Franz?
Franz Reichman from the Finance Committee. Well, first of all, I'll say that this software approach to smart parking sounds good to me. I'll be eager to hear more about that at some point. But going just with the hardware approach with these smart meters, first of all, the $475 figure, that sounds like a lot of money for something that does really only one or two things. And I'm just wondering how that was approached from a pricing standpoint. How many companies do that sort of thing, and were there alternatives that were looked at, et cetera? So, that's one question. But the other part of that, from the finance point of view, is if this loan from the utilities fund were to be undertaken, what would the payback time be, given the projections for increased revenue, et cetera? Thank you.
Would you like to answer?
Yeah, happy to. So the proposal would be for a 5-year payback to the utility fund. And in terms of the procurement for these particular smart meters, I believe there were something on the order of 6 or 8 different competitive firms that were bidding. Price, of course, was one component. And so there are certainly other businesses that have smart meter offerings. This was a particular company that won this particular competitive bidding. I would note that the $472.50 for the meter installed and delivered, et cetera, was based on a new meter, a brand new out of the box meter. There were other alternatives available. They had pulled some meters out of the city of Los Angeles after their upgrade, and so they had some used meters that were a slightly older generation. And I seem to recall they were something on the order of $255. But, Peter and I kind of looked at it and had a sense that the newer meter is A, new, and B, had nice features to it, had nice big tangible buttons you could touch, and it seemed like a quality product. If we were going to be going through this kind of transition, Brattleboro should get a quality product.
Nope.
This is an iPad. Right now, I could use it to watch a tennis tournament that's being played in Rome this week, and it costs $325. I mean, it just seems like this does an awful lot, whereas a parking meter does a little bit. And sure, a nice one. It's just all I'm saying is it was a little hard for me to understand why they're that expensive. That's all.
I don't disagree. The only thing that kind of comes to mind is that the smart meter is intended to be left outside for years on end.
Yeah, you don't leave that out in the rain and the snow, do you?
I haven't tried that yet, but yes, that's a very good point.
A couple of things. I wanted to ask David if next time this is on the agenda, hopefully it'll be June 5th, unless we're already filled, unless we're packed
No,
already.
it's going to be June 5th. It has to be.
It has to be. Bring some specific ideas for where bike parking, because you know about that, we don't. So come and bring some specific.
Send them ahead of time.
Or, yeah, even better. Yeah, send them ahead of time. And then the other thing, just an observation. I didn't know anything about. I'd heard something about apps on the phone, but I didn't know anything about it. And at this point, my whole frame is credit cards, and I think it's really great if I can stick my credit card in something and it works. But most of the people that I see around, including my daughter, they don't even use credit cards. Everything is on the phone. And I think it's important to recognize that it may seem like it's a great idea right now to get something that processes credit cards, but I have gone 180 degrees, and I'm thinking that we probably should be looking, since we're looking to the future, looking past the credit card part of it and really finding out about how the apps work. I mean, there's just so many places where people now, they just wave their phone and leave the store with the product. And that's what the younger, people who are becoming more active economically and more productive economically, that's what they're using, which is, some of you, obviously, but definitely not me.
Definitely
and,
not.
But one of my oldest friends made a very good living with a check printing business. And he doesn't make anything of that anymore. It went away so fast. And to think that the credit card machine is going to be the place we should be going next, I think maybe looking backward instead of forward. So just tossing that out there.
Nice. Yes. Mr. Wayne.
Wayne SD, 83 Main Street. I support Ms. Starr's recommendation to do a comprehensive review of the many, many suggestions I heard in the parking study. Only one of which was the smart meters. That may have been the only one that was connected with a potential revenue source, and I don't doubt that it will be a revenue source, because people count money in their hand, green dollars and coins, but they more easily spend credit card money and don't even look at the receipt. I think the potential revenue source seems to be the basis for jumping onto this one of the several recommendations, but it that shouldn't be the reason to jump at it. I recognize Stephanie's point about smartphone apps. I don't know, and maybe everyone in this room has a smartphone. I will tell you, you get out of Brattleboro and most people do not have smartphones. They do not have cell service. They don't have cell phones. They're still using pagers. Those are the people that are coming into town to buy things. They all have a credit card or a debit card. The saturation of that technology is nearly 100, well, probably 300%, because they have more than one in their wallet. The saturation of cell phones out of Brattleboro is not near 100%. So they will not be able to park downtown with an app. I've used the apps. They're convenient. You have to load them down on your phone. They take up space, and depending on your plan, they take up minutes when you use them. Smart meter technology is the same technology that businesses have in their stores for their credit card machines. Yes, they're weatherproof, but they are the same technology. That market, I know people who sell those credit card machines in stores, and the same technology encased in a better weather jacket is the exact same technology that goes into smart meters. The credit card technology in stores is a dying market because of Foursquare, which is a brand new technology that doesn't cost as much and is putting those credit card machine sellers and manufacturers under incredible stress right now. Their newest big market is smart meters, because you can't put a Foursquare, little plastic things that any retailer at the farmer's market can take your credit card and they plug it into their phone, and then they swipe your card through their cell phone. These credit card service companies that sell to businesses are really looking to this brand new market, and they will become much more competitive soon, because they are losing their business credit card machine market right now by the droves. That's all.
Thank you. I think there are a couple of issues. Some of them are budget issues that we've been talking about. Some of them not necessarily going to impact the budget, like if we use a space for bike parking, you know what I mean? Like, that's not a budget issue.
Right.
So there's some things that we're sort of on a deadline to figure out, and there are other things that we can sort of have a bigger plan and work them through, if that sort of encapsulates if everybody agrees with what I'm saying here. So it sounds as though what we'd like from Patrick or whomever is what the options are for meters, whether it's a smart meter, it's with the app, what are the available kind of meters out there? What you were talking about, the pay boxes, maybe, doing a demo, like we can have more info on that.
Okay.
What I'm trying to do is look at what are the issues that we're going to want to look at that came from the study that might impact the FY19 budget, so that we at least have them on a list somewhere. And lighting is another one, because, and I know we might not have the answers to this stuff as well as we want by the time we have to do the budget, but because one of the things I would like is somewhere on this proposed plan to put lighting.
Yeah.
Even it might be a 00000. If it's not on this list, we're going to forget about it. You know what I mean? Like, we have pay boxes on the list, we have surface lots on the list.
Paint and lighting. Does it
Yeah.
have to
We
be
really haven't
reflective paint?
prioritized, we haven't looked at all the recommendations
That's right.
and come up with any sort of
What color
prioritization.
is the transportation center inside now? Is it already white?
Dirty,
I'm sorry?
gross.
The transportation center paint on the inside, is it already white?
No.
No.
Because, does it have to be reflective paint, or can it just be a white paint with better lighting? I mean, wouldn't that still, because I know you said reflective paint's really expensive, but,
I don't know the
Can we
difference.
just
It
look
could
at
be white, it
that?
could be reflective. So the parking study just arrived, and there were some recommendations in that. We absolutely need to follow up with that. The timing of the two leaves not a whole lot of time in order
Wow.
to, get estimates on what it would cost to paint the transportation center. We absolutely will, continue to follow up on those things, and as Kate pointed out, add those to the capital program, and maybe they're only a $0 for now until we can come up with a
Right.
reasonable estimate, but I think that's a great recommendation
Right.
to not lose track.
Right, and, we were talking about, David was talking about moving pay boxes over to FY19. If we can figure out whether in 2 of the lots we can do a demo on pay boxes, that doesn't cost us anything,
Exactly.
So,
If we go ahead and make
You
the
know,
purchase
there-
on the smart meters, and whether or not we choose to do that obviously remains to be seen.
Right, yep.
The company would be willing to do the sort of trial period with us on the kiosks, and that would deliver some information that could fundamentally adjust the kiosk replacement program. You'll notice the ones that are there are basically the oldest, the 2004
Yeah.
series kiosks. We have kiosks that have been in service for, close on 15 years.
Yeah.
They're getting a little tired. They can either be replaced if we have enough cash on hand, or potentially if there's a way in which to demonstrate that there's going to be increased revenue there, we might be able to do the same type of thing with the kiosks.
I wonder if you could also explore in that same context, how much we could borrow from ourselves or from the utility fund, so that we might be able to paint and put in, do some of the other things. Because the painting is actually and lighting is really kind of on the top of the list from people I hear from, as far as, the sense of safety.
and we're gonna get bike parking information from,
because some of this stuff doesn't cost money, so, and like.
So we could still pass the budget.
Right, and like the time is ticking on the budgetary
budget
part, but there are the other creative things that we could do that
Right.
don't involve, and there are things that we could start planning now, for the future.
yep, I'm good with that.
So for the next time we talk about this, I just want to confirm, I've heard
Yeah.
3 things, I believe, that you'd like some additional information. An inventory of existing racks, some additional information on app-based, application-based parking programs, and then the ordinances.
I want to just see, why can't 2 motorcycles park in the same spot? What's going on with motorcycle parking? Let's not, an ordinance might have been drafted at a time where it seemed like a great idea, but now it might seem, stupid.
Sure.
Now, are you gonna add lighting to this list? I just don't wanna lose track of what we were
Absolutely.
at, yeah. And if there are other smartphone options, like I know not smartphone, smart meter, like, cause the ones you're quoted on is from that company.
Yep.
And you probably think those are like the most economical that you've been able to find.
They were the ones that
Okay.
won a nationally competitive
Okay.
bid process,
Okay.
so.
That would be good. Okay,
I think, Kate, you kind of listed a couple of the things, but I think if we all took a look at the recommendations in the study
Yeah.
and kind of came back with a prioritized list, or have you guys can give us your prioritized list in terms of what you think is doable and most important.
yeah.
I'll definitely take a look
Or
at
both.
at the study. I wouldn't be surprised if we can possibly afford to replace the stairwell in the transportation center. May still be,
Right, because I don't.
I think that is really the first priority for the parking fund,
Yeah.
more so than the Preston lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, me
And-
too.
And I think the question isn't what's doable with the amount of money we have, because that, that question, the answer ends with fixing the transportation center.
Right.
That doesn't talk about smart meters and everything else. You know what I mean? If we were to say right now.
Literally.
What's the priority for that 54,000? It would be fix a parking.
Right, 'cause
Parker.
that's-
So what we want, just to expand on what David said, is the whole thing with the meters, like you know what I mean?
Yep, range of options.
Right, because your answer would, the dialogue would end. We wouldn't go any
Yeah.
further because it would be, we have to fix the transportation center.
Right.
But you figured out creative ways that we could do some of this other stuff.
I'll try and come up with some more.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be great to have a superhero that could, oh, never mind.
It
I mean, like some sort of
would.
a parking
Yeah.
superhero?
If she
Yeah,
could
some
just
sort
keep
of-
flying around for a few more months
about
while we do
that.
our work, that'd be great.
So on June 5th, we're going to have our next discussion about the budget. And our goal is, because we think we have to approve it on the 19th of June.
Right.
Yeah, or
And-
sooner if we
yeah,
can.
Yeah, and I think we have to remember too, is that just because we passed the budget doesn't mean we're ending the discussion on the parking.
That's right.
Absolutely.
You can guarantee that.
Absolutely. You can
Yeah.
pass the budget on the 5th
Yeah.
and continue to talk
Or the
about
19th.
Yep.
Or the 19th.
Yeah.
And it's
continue to
unfinished
discuss
business, so
these.
it's earlier in the agenda.
That's
Yes.
right.
People can come.
That's right.
Okay. Does everyone feel like that's okay?
Yeah.
You?
Oh, yeah.
Is that a plan?
Plan standing.
Oh, Stephanie?
We're deciding on which pot of money. Is it the 56,000? No.
Well,
78,000?
Yes-ish.
yeah, in a way, yeah. We have to pass a budget. So what?
FY19.
Yeah, and what Patrick is telling us is that their estimation is we have 54 to spend, but that doesn't mean we're not gonna borrow money from the utility fund to put meters in.
So, but for real money, you're talking about 54,000 FY19,
Right,
which starts next.
July.
July 1,
Yeah.
yeah,
We're also thinking about borrowing.
yeah, so that's in the mix.
Yep.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, okay. All right, next up is the solid waste budget, which is trash and recycling and
Compost.
composting.
Yeah,
This is another fun budget, okay.
this is another fun budget. And may I?
Oh, yeah, go for it.
Excellent. So the point I'd like to start off with on the solid waste budget is historically, Town of Brattleboro has always approved its non-general fund budgets at this time of year. You know, that's why we're talking about the parking fund, that's why we're talking about utility, and now that's why we're talking about solid waste. John, Peter, and I have been talking about this, and we're all really ready to recommend that if we take up the solid waste budget next year, that we do so at the same time as the general fund. And the reason for that is one of the main sources of revenue for the solid waste fund is a transfer from the general fund. And so in this particular example, we set the transfer in from the general fund in the general fund budget that we worked on together last fall. In the intervening months, we've gathered information about realistic sense of expenses for the coming year. And now we find ourselves in a situation where, well, based on the trends, we're recommending that the expense side of the budget is at one level, but the transfer in isn't enough to bring the budget to zero. So that's why we're before you this evening proposing a deficit budget. And what we think is if we work on the solid waste fund budget at the same time as the general fund budget, we'll be in position to be able to recommend balanced budgets. So the fiscal 19 budget is before you. On the expense side, we've got, or excuse me, on the revenue side, we're pretty much carrying forward with the same numbers, except for we increased the transfer in, and we increased it to a number that we proposed in the general fund budget back in fall. Doesn't exactly make as much sense at this time. At that time, it did. On the expense side, the first couple of expense lines, refuse collection and recycling collection, those are by contract with Triple T. So they're going up 1% because that's what the contract had acknowledged. Town dumpsters is going up a little bit of a greater percentage, about 14%. And the reason for this is twofold. We have some new facilities that hadn't previously been in our inventory, such as the police station. But then also, we've expanded our recycling collection to other town facilities in order to comply with the state laws on that. And so we've expanded the number of town dumpsters, at town facilities, and for that reason, we're expanding that cost. The single largest expense increase on the expense side of the solid waste fund is in recycling tipping fees. And that's actually a fairly material increase of just under $40,000. And what's going on there is really a consequence of some global trends in recycling. As many of you may recall, a couple of months ago, there was an announcement that the nation of China had elected to no longer be a receiving entity for first world recycling. And because of that, it has shot up the cost of recycling worldwide. And so this is an impact which is not unique to Brattleboro, certainly not even unique to Windham County or Vermont, but is happening all over the globe. Just to give a bit of an example, in this last year, the town was paying $7 a ton to deliver its recycling to Casella in Rutland. It went from $7 a ton to $2 a ton. At one point, we were getting paid $3 a ton. And most recently, it's been $75 a ton. So it is still fluctuating rather wildly. And so it's not like there's a clear and consistent trend that we can point to and say, well, this is exactly what we think it will be in the future. So what we elected to do was to take the most recent 7 months, which are the higher, more expensive months, and to take their median, which was $60 a ton, and to apply that to the annualized tonnage of town recyclables. And that's where we came up with this new figure of $106 or $106,000, which is $39,000 more than the previous year. Let's see, what else we got going on there? The Windham Solid Waste Management Assessment is going down by about $34,000, and what this is a direct consequence of the closure of the MRF, which is the materials recycling facility, which had been operating at the Windham Solid Waste Management District. That program is now closed, and because of that closure, our assessment is going down and reflecting a lower cost to the district. Are there any questions?
Well, I came in a little bit late, but it's going down, but it's also going up each year. At least for the 3 years that we're looking at here, this year is the highest. It continues to go up. And part of that's built into the contract, which is the 1% hauling increase.
Anybody else have any questions?
Questions either about the budget or
anything dealing with solid waste?
Well, so I do have a question because one of the things I've been wondering about, couple of questions. One, do we know, I know there was some uproar around pay-as-you-throw as it was coming out and people getting adjusted to it. Have we ever done an assessment, or do we know how it's impacting individuals who rent or who do not have the means to afford the bags? And also, I'm curious about the hidden costs in the system because of pay-as-you-throw. So people who are improperly throwing things away and not recycling and whatnot. Let's just say I've heard stories in passing, or illegal dumping as a result of X. So are we interested at any point just going back and just assessing what the impact is on the system itself and on the people who live here?
So let's see if I can answer that in a couple of different ways, and I'll try and work in reverse order. One of the things you mentioned was illegal dumping.
Sure.
And I can say very clearly that the frequency with illegal dumping since the transition to pay-as-you-throw simply didn't materialize.
Okay.
There, it happens every year, half a dozen times you'll find, somebody just did a complete wrong and dumped a bunch of stuff on the side of a road. If it's in the public right of way, we're gonna take care of it. But the frequency of illegal dumping hasn't increased since pay-as-you-throw. Let's see, what are some of the other things?
The
Impact on
recycling
housing
and tipping.
renters.
Recycling and then impact on renters.
And
So
trash, yeah.
recycling, what I can tell you is that our ordinance and even the state ordinance and the district ordinance are all really clear that throwing away recycling is not permitted. It is also fairly well articulated in our contract with Triple T, who's our hauler, that if they find recycling in the trash, that they're directed to leave it and put a sticker on it which identifies, I'm lifting up this bag and I'm hearing cans and bottles clanking around, and so that's the reason why we're leaving it. That does occur.
That does occur. I've seen it.
Good. That's what should be taking place. I can't say that is catching absolutely everything, but I do believe that Triple T is doing a good faith effort to help us to enforce our recycling ordinances. In terms of the impact on individual households, we don't have any data on that, and I am confident it is likely inconvenient and possibly worse for a number of households, right? This is a cost. This is a cost. That was the design of the state program. They wanted to ensure that folks were charged for getting rid of their solid waste, their garbage, on a system that was based on weight or volume. And so if you produce more weight or volume, then you would have a mechanism by which you would be charged more, and that's the cost of the bags. As opposed to the old system, which was put it out on the corner and we'll pick it up and get rid of it. And there was therefore no financial incentive to try and make changes in your behavior. There was no financial incentive for continuing to recycle. There was no financial incentive for composting your food scraps. Is it challenging for some households, particularly lower income households? It would have to be. But the system that has been implemented in Brattleboro is one where everyone's being treated equally, and there are some households for which I'm confident it's challenging. A household, for example, with children in diapers, right? That's going to be a real challenge. Well, there you go, Tim. Oh yeah. And so, anecdotally, I would say I've heard from a number of households who have expressed that this is a challenge, and I frequently find myself saying, "You're right. I understand you, and I believe what you're saying, and you're not wrong. You're right. I don't have a solution for you, but I do understand the challenge."
Can I just say, though, that the beauty of the system we do have is that if you properly understand how you can compost at your household and you can recycle at your household, that's most of your weight in reality if you're using it correctly. And those two things are free. So the wonderful thing is, and we've talked about this multiple times before, is that the townwide composting system has been very successful, almost a little too successful because we've incurred additional costs because of it. But you can make an argument that it's a much more progressive system to have, mainly because we have the ability to, on a free basis, give away, our refuse from foodstuffs, and even my cat litter can go in because you have to use the right kind of cat litter. But that's very heavy stuff. It doesn't have to go into the trash that you pay for. So I'm a little curious about, you heard that people are abusing the system, and yet...
Well, I wouldn't call it abusing the system is a strong word, but people being concerned because they have restricted space. I even have restricted space. I don't have space on my apartment, on my rental, to like line up things, and I have slight OCD, and so I don't want to come out and be like, so I set up a system where I go into my garage and do it, and it's added to my chores. So, but that's me, that's minor. But I'm talking about situations where for people where the space is either restricted or it's just too overwhelming to be doing it. And I tend to ride the line of not everybody's going to be gung-ho about, you know, if you're working, let's say, a 16-hour shift, and that's your reality. You're not going to have time.
And you're a single
you're just
parent.
You're a single parent. I mean, you're just trying to catch up.
Go
with,
sort my trash.
Yeah.
It all
Well,
comes
thanks
down to
for it.
how are we going to pay for these services that
Sure,
everyone
absolutely.
needs.
No, I get that, and I thought I would do my due diligence by asking the
Yeah.
question because, you know, I'm just really curious and.
And one of the things, and because if John Allen is watching, we're going to give him credit, is that now we have a single stream system. So we can remind people of that. You don't have to separate plastic, paper, and tin cans and glass. You can put them all in the same bin.
I still separate it. Just
I do
'cause
too.
That's
That's
how my
just you.
brain works.
Yeah, yeah. But that was John's big thing.
I love not separating it.
John's big thing.
Yeah, it saves time, right?
I have
Yeah.
another numbers question, just real quickly. Refuse bag revenue down on the actual numbers from 2016 to 2017, over $100,000? What's driving that?
So the answer to that is the transition to, what I can tell you is, what happened at that same time, it's more of an association than I would say a cause, but the transition to every other week trash collection resulted in a drop in the number of bags we sell.
Okay.
The timing of those two things happened almost, happened identically.
I think that's because people are going to the dump themselves because they don't like their diaper sitting around in July.
I think that's very likely the case, at least for those households. That is, in effect, our recommended
For one,
course of action.
households with transportation, that is, to get to the dump.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah, a couple of points. The one is that I think the actual cost of the bags should be about $8 a piece, I think, or something like that. And we actually they're much
Which
less
ones?
expensive.
The yellow ones or the purple ones? 'Cause the purple ones are like 16.
They're five a piece, yeah.
They're
Okay,
$2
like
and
for a
$3
package.
presently for the
15
small
a
and for the
package.
large.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, they're 2 and 3, and they should be like 6 and 8 or something. We're basically subsidizing that. And the other thing that happened very quickly and continued, and we haven't had a report for a while in terms of tonnage, how much recycling and how much waste, but the amount of waste that was actually being picked up declined just right off the bat and continued to decline, which is why we went to every other week, because we just didn't have to pick the garbage up all the time. And that is by far the most expensive part of it, is to put the stuff we put in the landfill. So in a sense, it's actually saved a bunch of money that we can spend on other things, and we do subsidize the bags as well. There are people in living situations that it's not easy for sure, but overall it's achieving the objectives, including costing less.
Anyone have any questions?
Well, the recycling problem is everywhere. There was just an article in the Times. It's just, municipalities are giving up recycling entirely across the nation.
Yeah.
So it's a problem.
Yeah, put it back in the ocean.
Yeah. Feed it to the whales.
Anyone in the public have any questions?
Franz Reichsman, District 2. I just want to say that I hate not separating my recyclables. I think separating them is important.
I do too.
Because that will maximize their commercial value. And mixing everything up, I don't know how much separation is practical, and I'm not advocating anything specific here, but I just feel motivated to say that source separation should be one of the keys to making recycling cost less and maybe even turn a profit at some point. So that's for the future. Thank you.
Actually, that's the past. The future has become single stream, unfortunately.
The once and future recycling.
Well, we'll see. It has to, it's about the money and the haulers.
Yes.
I'd much rather talk about trash than parking.
I may have missed it. Does the
Trash.
recycling fund, or whatever the proper title is, does it also have a reserve like the general fund has the 10% and the parking has a 12% and the $450,000 in the utility is some percent? There's no reserve in this budget?
Yeah, there's really no reserve for the solid waste fund. One of the things that we have done in the last couple of years, I think we'll probably end up doing this year as well, is doing a supplementary transfer, an unbudgeted transfer at the end of the year to sort of reconcile things. We think one of the ways to combat that is to coordinate the timing of the general fund and the solid waste fund at the same time in the year. But there isn't an ongoing, there's not a 10% fund balance or something like that for the solid waste fund.
Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any comments or questions or anything that we want Patrick or anyone on the town staff to
Not
look
tonight.
into before they come back with the budget for us to approve on June 5th? That doesn't mean we can't, when we see it June 5th, ask questions, but
We're ready.
we're like to prepare.
I'm gonna save them up.
Okay. Okay, that was good. So no action tonight. Hopefully we'll approve it on the 5th. Next up is approving a 2% pay increase.
I was trying to do signatures.
Oh, 2% pay increase
Kind of word.
for non-union employees. And this is, what is this? In fact, 25 full-time employees and 15 part-time employees who are non-union. And they are mostly management supervisors along with 2 confidential employees. Money has been put into the budget for this, so it's not asking for anything. And as we all know, we've approved the other collective bargaining agreements for pretty much everybody else.
Yep.
So this is just to make these employees have the same, or almost the same increase as pretty much everybody else.
That is correct.
Does that make sense? Does anyone have any questions about that?
No.
No.
Anyone in the public have any questions about this? Would anybody like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion. Making a motion to approve a 2% increase for non-union employees effective July 1st, 2018.
We have a motion to approve a 2% pay increase for non-union employees effective July 1st of 2018. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Okay, the next thing is, we put it on, and then we had it for last meeting, we put it on, but subsequently, we've learned something. We were gonna talk about maybe not having the board meeting on July 3rd, because it's the day before July 4th. But subsequent to putting this on, after we put it on for last meeting, and then we didn't get to it because it was so late, we've subsequently found out that we have to approve the tax rate. So if we don't do it on July 3rd, it just means we're gonna have to have a meeting sometime else, like July 5th. July 3rd is an already scheduled meeting. I guess the question is, does everybody mind meeting on July 3rd and not making it a humongous meeting, but we have to do the tax rate. So if we don't meet on July 3rd, we're just gonna end up meeting July 5th. So, and the whole world knows we're gonna meet on July 3rd because it's a regularly scheduled meeting. So, yeah, those are sort of the,
I'm down with that as long as we keep it.
so basically the question is, can we still meet on
Brief.
July 3rd?
Yeah, because I'm leaving. I'll give you my schedule, but I'm leaving for 5 weeks.
Okay.
Missing a chunk.
Okay,
So I'll
perfect.
tell you, but
Okay.
I can make July 3rd.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So can everybody else, David and Tim, can you do July 3rd?
Yeah, I'd hate to disappoint the whole world.
Yeah.
It's always my goal not to do.
We need someone to live for.
I typed up a 2-page impassioned speech why we should meet on July 3rd.
Oh, you want
No, that sounds like a good idea.
That was a joke.
Okay, so for everybody out there, we are meeting on July 3rd.
All right.
All right.
Okay.
Now we need to announce the vacancies on the boards. And would anyone like to read these out loud, or would you like me to read them out loud?
Could hand them off. I'll read some and then someone else.
Yeah, I'll do the rest.
Okay,
When you get
go
tired,
yeah.
just tell me.
All right. Announcing fiscal year 19 committee vacancies. We have 11 vacancies on the Agricultural Advisory Board, 3 vacancies on the ADA Committee, 4 vacancies on the Arts Committee, 2 vacancies on the Cemetery Committee, 2 vacancies also on the Citizen Police Communications Committee, the CPCC, 3 vacancies on the Conservation Commission, 2 vacancies on the Design Review Committee, and 1 alternate vacancy on the Design Review Committee. 2 vacancies on the Development Review Board, and 3 alternates on the Development Review Board. 6 vacancies on the Energy Committee. 1 Energy Coordinator vacancy. 3 fence viewers are desperately needed by the town. 3 honor roll vacancies. 1 inspector of lumber, shingles, and wood vacancy.
2 vacancies on the Planning Commission, 2 vacancies on the Recreation and Parks Board, 1 Rescue Inc. trustee vacancy, 2 vacancies on the Senior Solutions Advisory Council, 1 vacancy or recommendation only on the SEVCA Board, 1 vacancy on the Traffic Safety Committee, a representative of the Chamber of Commerce, which means,
I have to the chamber makes that appointment.
oh,
Yeah.
okay, great.
It's not
But so
me.
people apply to you instead of
Yeah.
Jan. But I'll bet you Jan would forward them to you. If they- 1 vacancy on the Tree Advisory Committee, 2 vacancies for the Weigher of Coal, and an elected position for the second constable, 1 vacancy there. In-house position, we have vacancy for the collector of taxes, 1 for acting zoning administrator, a 3-year term, 1 for pound keeper, and 1 for road commissioner.
And those are classified as in-house positions, which I'm assuming means they're town employees.
Road Commissioner's going to be Steve Barrett.
We could pick other people.
Well, that's true.
You could be
Could
road
just
commissioner.
change all these names around and put them in different places.
That is true.
Right. And so what people need to do, these vacancies, or these terms begin on July 1st, and anyone interested should contact the town manager's office. And we're hoping to make these appointments June 5th, June 19th, or at subsequent meetings if we need to. And I'm assuming this list is available online somewhere on the town website?
Each of the committees have an explanation of the committee and the vacancies, the seating.
Perfect. I think we're done, aren't we? With that, oh no, we have to do one other thing. We have to disband the West River Park Committee. And we are disbanding them because they have fulfilled their duties. I think they were there to fundraise, correct, Patrick? Wasn't it build and fundraise? And
Yeah, I build, fundraise, provide guidance on the development of the park. Park opened a couple of years ago. It's
it's time to,
well done. This is just a piece of housekeeping.
yep.
Excellent.
So, does somebody want to make a motion to disband the West River Park Committee and thank them for their service?
I'll make a motion to formally disband the West River Park Committee and thank everyone for their excellent service.
We have a motion to disband the West River Park Committee and thank everyone for their excellent service. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Would someone like to make a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
So I have a motion to adjourn. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? No. Motion carries 5-0. We adjourned.
All right.
Thanks for everybody who helped make this meeting possible and for everybody who watched.
That's right.
Thank you.
Now go to bed.
That's what it is.
Off-topic questions.
Yeah.